I think it's a benefit to our enforcement staff. And it really, I see a big difference
Thank you,
in the
Jim.
way we patrol.
Thank you, Jim.
Thank you. Can I ask one question regarding the parking meters? And I think this has probably been asked and answered before, but these new systems, when we're looking at, or when the parking committee is looking at, do we need parking, do we not need parking? Sometimes it's a little anecdotal and it's more about perception of people. They see, oh, I drove down the street and I saw lots of parking spots. But with the technology in these new kiosks in the system, we can tell how many spaces were empty at any given time or in a certain zone. We can get hard data on the parking meter usage throughout the year, correct?
Yes, I mean, mostly to some extent, but Evan's going to explain just a little bit about what we are able to do and hopefully what we can continue to implement in the future.
Sure. So the digital iris software that June briefly kind of mentioned essentially gives us the ability to go in and run reports, generate reports, see real-time information in terms of visitors or residents purchasing time by zone and by time. We don't have the ability right now to track how many spaces are available. That software would basically involve, or that technology would involve, individual space identifiers, and there's sensors, I've seen them in parking garages before, in which every single space essentially has a sensor, and that would be able to identify when spaces are available versus when they're occupied. So at the time, we don't have the ability to determine how many spaces are open versus full, but we do have the ability to determine the amount of transactions taking place in a given zone.
So to some extent, I mean, that the future of this is, wide open, at least. When we implement Phase 3, hopefully in the 2022 budget, in the summer of 2021, we'll be able to see, a lot more progression. And as with every year, we talk to these folks and we meet with them. We go to conferences with them, and they're developing their own systems and improving on them.
So I guess I asked the question because it's come up several times in the parking garage task force meeting, the parking committee recommendation meetings, and some of this data I don't think has ever been made available. So it's hard to say sometimes. Do we need a parking garage or not? It seems to be all about perception and not data, whereas we could say, well, on average, 70% of the time, or 100% of the time, on average, 70% of the parking spaces were utilized, which means there was always about 30% available. So I guess that's the kind of data that I'm hoping us investing in this new technology and the machines we can get to.
Yes, instead of just having a visual that this section is never used and to have the hard numbers. Yeah, we're going to.
I just want to make sure that when we're investing in new technology and advancements like this, that it's going to provide some good outcome for us. I know that administratively it makes easier for paying and payment methods and stuff like that, but I think data is also important for us to keep in mind. So I just want to make sure that major investments like this in technology is going to have the outcome that we need too.
Understood.
And I have a couple of related questions. Evan, you said that it doesn't tell us how many empty spaces there are. But is that technology that they have, we just aren't employing yet? Is it technology that they're going to be developing? Or, because I see it in other towns, where you see how many spaces are available in a certain area, and it would be great to have that, even though I know we don't have it now.
So where I've seen it implemented, if you're talking specifically about available parking spaces, how many are occupied, how many are free, essentially that technology that I've seen involves, sort of as I mentioned earlier, individual sensors within every single parking space.
Right.
That would identify when a vehicle is occupying the space and when it isn't. I've mostly seen it in parking garages. When I worked for the Borough Media, they had it implemented in parking garages. Essentially, I've also seen communities shift away from that technology because of just the sheer capital that's involved in investing in the technology for every single space parking.
And then the other question was, there was some sort of issue last summer about a glitch or something in the system that caused the people not to register when they paid for parking. There was a delay, and so they got a ticket during that 10 minutes. Is that fixed?
We're working on that right now. We actually have sort of two vendors that we've been working with. One is Genetech, which provides the LPR solution. The second would be Park Mobile.
Yeah.
So essentially the way that our system was configured was any payments run through Park Mobile was then sent to our parking software and then kicked over to the LPR enforcement vehicle. What we're doing now is exploring the ability to have Park Mobile integrate directly with the LPR vehicle to cut back on that lag time.
Okay, okay.
One of the things to remember too is from a data perspective, until we have the same technology everywhere in town, it's going to be pretty difficult too, because we do have a lot of those older meters, the quarter meters that we can use for Park Mobile, but from a technology perspective, that's going to be difficult. So I think it's the continued investment that we make, but in 3 or 4 years, maybe we have a better opportunity to do something like that.
Good. Okay, if we can just turn to the new packet of information that you were given. We revised some of the numbers. Again, on the first sheet, the budget highlight sheet, that is dated 1/15/2020. That sheet looks like this. Just note, please, that we have a balanced budget. And from the last meeting that was held on January 5th, you suggested revisiting the revenue and also exploring CIP expenditures to include certain items. Well, since that time we were able to do that, we have made varying calculations predicting additional revenue, and these are highlighted on the budget change sheet, which is budget change sheet that accounts for the revenue on the top half and the capital outlay changes on the bottom half. So those budget revenue changes that we were able to take a look at and revisit, we put an additional $800,000 into the first item of sale of property. That's 84 Kent Street. We looked at the lease and had a city solicitor look at that, and we are able to sell that property at an estimated $800,000. So that's additional revenue that we put into the budget. The hotel tax, after spending some time talking to, having some conversations with certain business leaders in the hotel industry in the city, we're confident that, and we were able to increase that line item with an additional $300,000 to make that total $800,000. And as far as the property transfer tax, again, being very conservative because that's what we do here, we did increase that by $100,000 to make that total $1.6 million. So that's an estimated additional $1.2 million in added revenue that we're working with. On the
Sharon,
same
can I
budget.
ask one question on the property transfer tax? So I believe in the last meeting, Bird, you said that that doesn't go into the operating budget, but comes in restricted, does it not?
Well, let me clarify that. It does go into the operating budget, but we segregate the money that we receive in the transfer tax, and that's by state law. So the actual cash that we've collected is separated, and so it has restrictions on it. But Delaware Code has some a listing of the restrictions, but they're very broad. So if we had a capital project or something that we wanted to do that was really essential, I think we would, fit within those restrictions and could use that money. But, traditionally, it just accumulates right now.
So Bert, the segregation of those funds is primarily for accounting purposes, for reporting to the state?
Well, we don't really have to report to the state, but it's the state. There's a section of state code on restricted funds. It's a short blurb. I can provide that probably at the next meeting. But basically, it does impose some restrictions on what you can do with transfer tax. But they're so broad that we've got a lot of wiggle room. We could, if we needed to spend that money, we could.
I
So,
guess go ahead.
so we have an account that has transfer taxes from previous years. So we have a balance in that account, I'm assuming, that is significant?
Yes.
Okay. It would be helpful to have the restriction sent to us. I think that would be important.
I can do that.
So
Thank you.
just clarification, so it's showing up as revenue, and are those funds used in operating budget, or are they removed out into a restricted fund, or are those funds expended here in the operating budget?
They are used in the operating budget. And that's part of our prediction. Bert lived through a time where the property tax was much less, in a certain year. So, again, we're just on the conservative side when we estimate that.
I think your question is, are we using that money to balance the budget?
That's what I'm
And
asking.
the answer is yes.
And it is included, yeah. So with that additional $1.2 million in revenue on the same budget change sheet on the second half on the bottom there, we made the following funding adjustments. We included the Delaware Avenue restroom expansion at $640,000. And I want to also have Kevin just talk about these, but let me run through them first, and we'll be able to show you the PowerPoint that we have. We looked at the additional stormwater assessment, and we found repairs that are urgently needed as soon as possible. So we had put $50,000 in there at the first iteration of this, and we included an additional $200,000. And you'll see why in just a few minutes. The boardwalk recycling containers and the electric vehicle that goes along with that for pickup and disposal. So we added the boardwalk recycling program into this budget. We added the Henlopen Avenue speed cushion, and continuing with the LPR, our LPR program, we're adding the virtual parking permits that will hopefully be in operation within this next budget cycle. And we also put in the Lake Gerard Tot Lot ADA enhancements, and we'll explain why we needed that as well. So if we can just, Kevin, take a look at the PowerPoint for these, go through them one by one.
Rather than go into projects, I want to understand, I'm kind of so mad right now, I feel like I'm in the twilight zone, to be honest. I don't know what meeting I was in last month, but we came through with consensus on many projects that we questioned in terms of the expenditures, particularly from the streets and the streets department, and then came forward with things that we had consensus on that we wanted to see in here. And it's almost virtually none of those things are, well, very few of those things are accounted for here. We talked about, getting the, doing some smaller amount on the restrooms. I don't remember a consensus, and maybe I'm wrong, on spending $250,000 to put playground equipment when our entire infrastructure's falling apart in this city, to include the Kent Street, the 4th Street, all the issues we're having with stormwater over there. I don't remember consensus on moving that in. I do remember consensus on asking the city, the streets department specifically, to look at reducing, do we really absolutely need a new street cleaner right now? Do we absolutely need a new leaf blower? Do we absolutely need a new dump truck? When I asked about the 4th Street, Kent Street project, you said the criteria to make something urgent was 48 hours or plus of standing water. There's been 72 hours plus of standing water there, and it's still, the status hasn't changed. So as you're going through this, I don't want to jump, I'd like to understand the thinking as to why so many things the commissioners came to consensus on are not in here, or addressed or reduced. And I just don't understand. I sat in that meeting, I read everything, and the things that we talked about as priorities to be reduced or added aren't in here, in a large part. So I just want to understand the thinking on those discussions and why it's so different in so many cases than what we discussed.
So we can talk about them individually. We're happy to do that. We have some urgent needs here.
This one, well, Delaware restrooms, I don't understand, but this one we talked about. I'm talking more about the full 640,000, the 250 are in there at the expense of other storm repairs or convention center investments. I'm just very confused, so.
Storm sewer assessment is, that's new, based on new
That's
information,
new, and I
right?
get it. I mean, I get that, and we're gonna hear about it.
So, I'm eager to hear about that.
I'm just flabbergasted, to be honest, so I just need a better understanding of why
Hopefully
we.
it'll be helpful to hear this
Yeah, I'd like to hear,
explanation.
I think,
Then
but we're
then
starting
start-
can
then
talk
circle
about
back.
it. I think
Starting
so.
with projects as opposed to the thinking on why you picked these projects, as opposed to including some of the things or deleting some of the things we talked. So I just want to understand that first.
Sure. Do you want to continue with the presentation here, or do you want to go through them
I
one
just
by
want to
one?
understand what you're thinking.
I
I want
think-
to hear it.
I think if we see the presentation
let's
first,
hear
because then that may answer some of our questions, and then after the presentation, we can talk about perhaps the things that we would like to see on there that maybe aren't. So that seems to me to be a good way to
There's
proceed.
consensus to do it that way.
Yeah. Plus, I have to say, I think we got off the rails a little bit the first time because we didn't hear it in this order last time. We got off talking about specifics, and I think if we start it this way, it'll be more efficient. So I'd love to hear it.
And Lisa, I think, hopefully this will help us then understand what the process has been to
Well,
put
and
this list
that's what I-
together
Yeah,
as
yeah,
opposed
that's
to
right.
some other things. And then we
Exactly.
can circle back to
Yeah.
those other items.
Exactly. And in the last 10 days, we've have some new items to uncover for you that are, we put to the top of the list that are an emergency. We absolutely did look at different areas in stormwater and trucks, but Kevin goes back and reviews this with the supervisors of each department, and the supervisors alone and Kevin believe that there's urgent needs here needed in trash to be able to run the whole program and to be able to look at that. So if you can just continue with this, please.
Sure. So, I mean, this one we've talked about before. I think you've seen those schematics before. It didn't, at 600,000, it's a pretty big nut. So to be able to get that into the budget, is always going to be tough. But it was one that, various committees have commented on, and most of you have commented on the need for family restrooms, changing rooms, those types of amenities for our visitors. So that's what that is. You can see there's the schematic basically adds a couple of family restrooms, several family-sized changing rooms, and then 6 or 8 individual changing rooms. And they're constructed around the back of the existing facility on the back deck. So as you look at it from the boardwalk, they'll be offset toward the back. Mainly exterior to the building changes.
Kevin, can
And there's kind of an artist rendering of what it
that
would
work
look
be
at.
done in time for this next season? Is that what you're proposing here?
No, it would not be. It would start construction after this season.
And what's driving this? Are we in are we getting penalized or something for being out of ADA compliance?
No, it's
I mean,
just
is
an-
there anything along those lines that are, is there leaks, plumbing, people getting injured, safety issues? And then have you looked at just converting one of these to a unisex bathroom, for example, as opposed to, like, which is the trend, if you look at all the municipality trends, it's moving towards unisex bathrooms as opposed to renovating just to add more, specific, kind of gender components to a restroom. So I'd like to understand the answers to those questions on this project.
So the continuing comments we've received is it's capacity. So we want changing rooms, and we want family restrooms and family changing rooms. Now, whether you convert an existing room to a unisex room, as you call it,
Well, it's not as I call it. This is the trend in municipalities, is to move to gender neutral or unisex.
But
as
that doesn't
opposed
answer the
to-
need, you and I talked about this, it doesn't answer the need for family restrooms, which is for a caregiver and a person to occupy the same space, but a private space,
Right.
right?
And if you're, on these two restrooms, as you know, on both the female and the male side, each isn't a single restroom. It's a restroom
Right,
with
yeah, yeah.
8 or so stalls. And so it'd be very difficult to make it a unisex. I mean, the only unisex thing you could make is separate stalls that may be in the construction in the back. But I just don't think you could do it on the front,
So,
where it's-
just so I understand, because I went and took a look at this, if this is the front, right? So, is that the front?
correct.
Okay, so on each side, there's a curved wall, and then there's some rooms back here, and I'm guessing those rooms are for storage of toilet paper or something like that?
If you look at the current schematic here, you
Yeah.
can kind of see, and this is a swing space.
Okay.
So typically, that's female during the summertime, because that's for whatever reason, we have the requirement for more female restrooms than men. So there's a swinging door there, a roll-up door. We open that, and that's typically female.
So maybe that could be reconfigured to be a family restroom?
Sure. Doesn't help with capacity, because you're losing capacity
Well-
to build.
That may be true, but I still, I think there's a real need for the family restrooms, and we may have to sacrifice a little of the capacity there. I don't know. I can't, the answer to the capacity question is, you can tell me what kind of issues you've had, and if there are other restrooms on the Rehoboth Avenue in Baltimore can't accommodate, then maybe.
So I think I would just refer back to what the Beach and Boardwalk Committee has said to this group numerous times about what the desires would be and the needs were. So
Well, I guess we need to figure out which one is priority, whether it's family restrooms or, or not.
Let's just clarify it. Family restrooms are built into this
plan.
plan,
Correct.
correct?
But they can't, based on
can
what's
still see it
already in
here.
existence, they can't be just put in there without taking away from capacity.
Right.
And so, yeah, it looks like in the construction side, where those red stars are brand-new stuff in the back.
back right is the family restrooms. We have family changing rooms on this side.
That would be added on to the structure that's already there.
Actually, it sits somewhat apart from it. You can see there's that wall that the commissioner talked about, but it sits maybe one of the side view is best. You can see there's that's the two family restrooms. So they sit toward the back.
It would be completely different construction than they are right now.
Correct. You still have that walkway kind of between them.
Yeah, I guess my concern is the price tag on this is so significant part of, what we were looking at in terms of changes and other things that we were hoping to have funded. So I was looking for something that perhaps would be a reduced idea of what we could do here. May or may not make sense in the long run, I don't know, but it just seems that's more than half of what the change is in terms of the funding.
So it's, You know, this is, to me, a continuation of what we did this year. So we spruced up, you'll remember that, that was the whole conversation from last budget season. We spruced up the 3 restrooms. We were very successful in doing that on time and under budget. And this is a continuation of that. We have some, none of this work, of course, has to be completed, and we can remove this from the budget, but some work does need to be done, considerable work on the boards that, Kevin, you can explain it better, that are walked on and used on a daily basis. But, and that work would be done prior to this summer, correct?
Correct. We have
And then this work would be done because it has to be, design has to be continuation of that, and then it needs to be bid out, and we don't have time to do that. So this was just again, I call it a continuation of last year's discussion into this year, that's sprucing up into this. We have plans that we'll show you that are in for the following years in this 5-year CIP for Baltimore Avenue restrooms and possibly Rehoboth Avenue restrooms. That was our charge, to see what we could do, if it's even possible to go there. Priorities change, I understand that. And if that's where we need to be this year, then we'll certainly address that. But the equipment, the trucks, the vehicles, you know, we'll talk about that as well, and why that's needed.
No, I just throw that out as is there a possibility of reducing that number by doing something else? If it's not, it's not. I'm just wanted to bring it up.
I mean, I do think these restrooms are a priority. You know, one thing is the renovations were in the budget last year, right? But my understanding is the actual cost came in a good bit lower.
Yes.
So where did that go? That went back into the general fund, or?
It goes back into the general fund.
So I don't know if that makes a difference now, or we can probably can't connect those things now, right? The savings of last year to
Well, we were
part
able
of
to
this.
add, we were able to, again, when things came up, you know, just as in your home project, it's
Yes.
always more.
Right.
In this case, we were able to save some money for that, and
Yeah.
then additional issues came up while
issues for
working
that.
on
Okay.
that, so.
Okay. But, you know, maybe this will come in less. Do we know? I mean, is this a realistic estimate, or is it possible this might come in less?
So this is a preliminary estimate by the architect. So once he gets, if he gets the okay, it goes through, prepares the design, then we'd have a much better estimate on the construction cost. So that was kind of a combined architect's estimate.
Kevin, can you just clarify exactly what this entails? Are we gutting the existing?
No.
No, it's just
So
the
if you
addition.
recall back to, last year, there was a concerted effort to only do things last year that if we decided to move forward in following years doing more things, that we didn't want to undo something we just did last year. So we were very conscious about focusing on the things that if we decided to expand later on, we wouldn't rip out things we had just put in. So we tried to minimize, and this does, anything happening on the inside other than just to manage flow within the building. So it's not ripping out, losing any of the stuff we just built. So all of the work is, 99% of the work is on this outside deck behind the building, the back side of the building.
That's the 640.
Couldn't.
So nothing's really going into the front other than replacing a board. here and
Correct,
there.
right. And on the inside, you just see a couple of doors to readjust the storage area and reline a counter, so it's
Kevin,
minimal inside.
by adding the family assistance restroom capacity to this, it doesn't decrease the capacity of the
That's correct, it's all new
existing
capacity.
women's and men's restroom.
That's correct.
So that would be, if we wanted to spend less, then that option would result in decreasing the current capacity of the
Correct.
men's and women's restrooms.
Obviously, we tried to maximize, we tried to get family restrooms, we wanted family changing rooms, we wanted other changing rooms, and we tried to maximize that capacity, and that's what,
And, you know,
That's
we're
kinda
getting
what they
more and
came
more
up
people
with.
all the time. So it doesn't, I don't know, it doesn't seem logical to reduce capacity when we've got more people, and it's a basic amenity that's expected, I think.
Kevin, because it's hard to tell, can you just explain, we're adding 2 family changing rooms, 3 normal changing rooms, and 2 family restrooms?
2 family restrooms here. family changing room there, 2 family changing rooms here, and then 1, 2, 3, 4 changing rooms.
It's just, it's hard to see. So
Sure,
I just
no, I
wanted to make
understand.
sure we knew the details of what was being added.
I mean, without getting rid of the capacity that we have right now, because I think the capacity we have right now in this bathroom is very important, because the capacity on Baltimore and the capacity on Rehoboth are much smaller than this. Would it be possible, I mean, since maybe we are questioning the construction this coming year, would it be possible to have something, and I'm sorry to put this, like portable, like you have at concerts, that, at concerts, you'll have somebody that pull in something like an 18-wheeler, and it's got like 10 units in one thing set back there. Would it be possible to speak to somebody about having something that could function as 2, 4, maybe as many as 6 changing room, bathroom, family, unisex, because they all have separate doors? I mean,
To rent them.
rent it, yes,
Yeah.
for the summer, and park it right there where the construction would be. I mean,
No, I've seen them. I could see that as so in between solution for this year.
yeah, just an in-between solution, just.
Yeah.
But, I mean, I think in the long run, this has got to be done. Just as in the long run, we've got to look at Baltimore, because I think there are some structural changes there. I don't know what we can do on Rehoboth Avenue because of the property itself, but this is part of what has been suggested for the last 2 or 3 years. We did as much as we could last year on all 3 places to spruce them up, but this, I think, is something that is there for the future, whether that future is this year, next year, whatever, but I think it has to be done.
So could we maybe ask Kevin to go back, and I know the Beach and Boardwalk Committee did quite a bit of research this past year and visited other communities that have some of the portable options like you're talking about, and then maybe have Kevin come back to us at the next meeting with other options that would be in the interim for this coming season?
Well,
Is that something that you see, Kevin? that-
we can certainly, scrap this and just do the basic needs that we continue to move forward and we have to do before the season starts again. So, that's something we can scrap. As far as the portable restrooms, we were looking for a more permanent solution, cost-effective.
Yeah.
I think renting them is a great idea. We looked into doing that actually for larger events that we have and putting something in the, at the south end of the boardwalk. So, that's something that we looked into last year, and we actually did on a piecemeal basis, not with one of those large units, but, we get pushback from that as well. So,
I think what we're talking about here is to provide the service sooner, so we don't have to wait a whole other season, is what the mayor had suggested. Not to replace it, but just to provide the service to the families who have a need this season, this upcoming season, rather than have it to wait until we go through the normal procurement cycle and the build-out and everything. But I think that former Commissioner Stan Mills had raised his hand. It might be a good opportunity to hear what he has to say.
Please. Thank you.
Thank you, Stan Mills. I chair the Boardwalk and Beach Committee. I'd just like to respond randomly to some different comments. One is the committee is definitely looking at increased capacity. This is based upon the lines that form out there. Now, particularly at big events, but other times during the year when we get these lines expanding. So if you do your math, you get 3 persons a minute coming into a restroom, it's 200 an hour. That's over 2,000 people at one restroom facility. And you want to cut that capacity back, say the 2 women's restrooms at the Delaware, to 1,400 and versus 2,000, we're going to have a big problem there with lines and everything. So One of the things that we did say is that the changing rooms, we weren't placing a great value on those changing rooms. What we placed the most emphasis and value on was the family restrooms. And my opinion and the commercial committee's opinion is that we want to be a premier handicap accessible town. And we're doing that on the beach and boardwalk with our Moby mats, our accessibility mats. Where we fail is in the family restroom area. We have handicap accessibility to the restrooms at Baltimore, Rehoboth Avenue, and Delaware Avenue, but we don't have capacity for the family restrooms. Now, so if we had to, we suggest we do it all in lump sum. We need to bite the bullet and do it. We were hopeful, actually, that Delaware Avenue would be realized for this summer, so that we would have family restrooms available this summer.
So
But
Stan,
we haven't gotten there. So if we needed to, we would suggest waiting till we can afford this, but definitely get it in the following year's budget, or actually this year's budget, so that we can finish the design and bid it. The other thing would be is if we needed to sacrifice the changing rooms on the south side of the street as a possibility, although there's an economy of scale of doing both projects at the same time. In terms of portables, don't forget we want family restrooms to be handicap accessible. So yeah, you can have portables, you can have trailers, but you have to have those ramps that go up to about 3 feet high to get you into the trailer. So they're not optimum either, and they cost money. As far as portables in other towns, former Commissioner Jay Legree and myself toured 20 boardwalk towns in New Jersey. I can't remember the count, but I think the supermajority, if not all of them, had family restrooms and had unisex bathrooms. That's essentially what a family restroom is, unisex. Anybody can use it, and that's the purpose of it. And it's a little bigger than normal so that you can accommodate the caretaker and somebody else, or two children with their caretakers, plus a wheelchair, plus handy bag or something. Now, as far as the portables in these other towns, I don't recall ever seeing any portables. However, just as an aside, Cape May, Belmar, New Jersey, for instance, Belmar, New Jersey has these portable trailers that they actually store over the wintertime in their public works yard, and they bring them to the beach and physically install them on the boardwalk so that they are at roll-in height for everybody to go in, so they are all handicap accessible. So that's the only type of thing I've seen which wouldn't work in our situation at all. So again, looking at the town overall and its growing capacity and the growing need for restrooms, this is just phase one. Hopefully we'll be giving more serious entertainment to modifications and additional restroom facilities at the Baltimore Avenue facility, and go from there. So increased capacity, and then the family restrooms valued over the changing rooms if we need to sacrifice something.
So just to clarify, are you, and then Kevin, and you may have different answers, I'm not sure, are you using the terms changing room and family accessible bathroom as different on the interior?
Yeah, no,
Or are they one and the same?
No, they're two different things. Family restroom would have a baby changing station, it would have a toilet, it would have a lavatory, should have some kind of shelving unit to be able to put your toiletries or bag or something on them, that type of thing.
And large enough for a caretaker to bring?
And large enough for 5 people in there, if you will, okay? Whereas a changing room is literally, it can be 3x3, 4x4, that has maybe one bench seat, and that's it. There's no shower on it. there's no shower in the family restrooms. Our showers are all the foot showers and the shower towers located on the boardwalk themselves. Kevin, is that, that's?
That's correct.
Right, yeah.
Right.
So have we made a conscious decision to begin to add changing rooms? I understand the critical need for family assistance restrooms. I really think we have to go there as quickly as we can. But have we made a conscious decision to add changing rooms to our
I don't believe
boardwalk
we have.
venue?
No.
Well, I think it's a question.
That's,
I do, that's what I started to ask Stan earlier, was if the change rooms are not a priority, it seems to me adding another 1 or 2 family restrooms would be smarter, because the reality is people will probably go into those restrooms and use them as changing rooms. And as far as the family restrooms themselves, I don't know what the frequency would be, but it seems to me that it's, you know, they'll be used, but at the same time, they'll be empty sometimes, and people will go in there and, you know, use them as changing rooms. So I would say just go with family restrooms and not the changing room.
well, I came on late on this, and my recollection was that we had 2 family restrooms on each side, meaning 4. Now I see that that's not the case. I think the committee would be for that, because that tilts it the different direction. There's more family restrooms than changing rooms, because again, changing rooms, we were not absolutely sold on those. We kind of left it up to the city management. I think they're good, though.
But you would put,
Because we get a lot of, in the New Jersey towns, almost every town had some kind of changing room. Little teeny closet, so, you know.
but you
you're-
would put family restrooms on both sides there, as opposed to just doing one side.
Well, I'm throwing a wrench into their plans, but,
because that's
because
even-
I didn't
probably even more.
participate in them, but I would say at least please consider that, yes.
So we do, Commissioner Calusi brought up the fact that we also think that people will go into the family restroom. However, the need for the changing room is obviously apparent as well. We have many, many complaints over the course of the season. I've seen them. I'm sure you've seen people that, you know, are just changing on Rehoboth Avenue, or in their vehicles or not in their vehicles. So this doesn't afford the opportunity for everyone who wants a changing room, but it was a start. So that's why we had it programmed.
As a former commissioner, I met with a lot of constituents, especially those that live in the first block area, from north to south, that were complaining about people changing clothes between cars and everything. So I think it's a good thing. The number of, the ratio of number of changing rooms to family restrooms maybe could be contemplated further.
And just if I could, at this stage of an artist render, an architect's rendering, I mean, if we wanted to use, and we'll work with the boardwalk committee to decide, if we wanted to have 4 family restrooms and do away with the family changing rooms, I mean, that's certainly able to be done at this stage. Just a small, probably impact on the overall cost of the project. Just run a couple more pipes, but we can certainly
And I'd like
decide
to
that.
remind you too, that the committee has made recommendations to increase the number of restroom attendants at all the public restrooms. Absent that, be mindful that at the Delaware Avenue restrooms, we do have attendants there. And I think that it's necessary to have the restroom attendants, both male and female there, especially with family restrooms, because they can be monitored. You still want to monitor them for cleanliness and for occupancy and use.
And these would not be open all year, would they?
Well, the committee's recommendation is that family restrooms somewhere be available year-round. So whether it's here or whether it's the Baltimore Avenue facility, you know, planning ahead, you know, because the Baltimore Avenue facility has an initial concept, I think, that has some family restrooms there, as well as increased number of stalls, I believe, to increase capacity there, as well as adding family restrooms. But that's on the design in the budget for, I think that was deferred till next year, which means we're talking realization of that, 2 years, 2.5 years from now. But again, even the Baltimore Avenue restrooms have attendants there to watch over them, so to speak. So that, to me, that's part of the component of this, because the restaurant attendants are not cheap. You know, but they have a definite value in deterring vandalism and as well as maintaining cleanliness. All right,
Thank you.
thank you very much.
Kevin, going back to what you just said a few minutes ago, the construction costs wouldn't be that much different if you pulled out the changing rooms? Or,
Converted them to family restrooms, so it's
well, right now, how many family restrooms do you have in that picture?
two.
Two on each side?
No, just the two on the one side. These would be family changing room only.
Maybe what we're supposed to do is look at two family restrooms on each side, instead of anything else. Or at least one changing room on each side. No, excuse me, forget the changing rooms. Because, you know, honestly, this would be great to have 6 or 7, 8, whatever changing rooms they have here. But I think the changing in between cars in neighborhoods is going to still go on, just because the amount of people that we have in town. And unless we have 4 different facilities for changing, I think that would be pretty difficult. But maybe the immediate need is family restrooms. Is there a possibility of putting 1 or 2 on each side at a substantially less price to fit? Yeah, I mean, is there any way up on those porches that there's any space to put a family restroom without having to do all that construction, or you'd have to do that construction because everything else is taken, pretty much?
Well, if you look at the back of the building, I mean, there is a significant amount of construction that has to happen to get that up to that level.
Gotcha.
Uh-oh.
I gotcha. Okay.
But, I mean, that back can be configured in any way. If we don't want to do any changing rooms, you know, if we just want to do family restrooms, I mean, all that.
It is a pretty substantial price, and, you know, my thought is, if we want to cut the price, that's how we do it, just have family restrooms. Or this year, we put in the design phase for this, and then we just put in for the CIP next year that we do the project. And postpone, I mean, we're not going to be able to do anything until the fall anyway. But we could get the design, and maybe even the design for Baltimore, so that we have something, so that we think about for the next 2 or 3 years how we want to place that into the budget. Because, you know, if this is something we want, it's going to have to happen sometime.
So are you suggesting that we fund the design now, and then come April of next year, next budget season, we are ready so we could actually perhaps get the construction done before the season, or what?
You won't be able to do that from 1 April to
Okay,
30 May.
okay.
It would be the fall again.
Yeah, and that's why we're putting it in the budget for this year, because it would be for really showing up in
Because of the
21.
way our cycle works, you know, 1 April, you really can't do a lot between 1 April and 30 May. So, you know, you're really waiting until September. So you're losing the current season and hopefully get it done in time for the following season.
Did the spruce up last year at this time.
Right.
They were able to, you know, commit the funds before, and, or at least, you know, they knew we were good for it, and they ordered everything and got it done just under the wire.
Yeah, I think it, based on everything I've heard today and from past meetings, I'd be in favor of having 4 family restrooms, as former Commissioner Mills mentioned, having 2 on each side, and not worry so much about the changing rooms, because I don't know if having 4 or 5 changing rooms is going to change the behavior of people.
Plus, I think people will change in the family restrooms when they're not being, so
Yeah.
I think they can serve a dual purpose.
Right.
Yeah,
I like that option.
yeah.
As well, and they can serve also as changing rooms where families need to go in and assist people, adults that need assistance and children that need assistance.
I agree with having more restrooms instead of changing rooms, but at the end of the day, I want to hear the rationale for everything else and then look at it as a big picture and prioritize. you know, looking at everything.
Above and beyond the restrooms you're talking about.
Yeah.
We're talking options now as we go forward in the
Well,
coming weeks.
so for this one, I mean, it sounds like we don't want to put 640 in the budget for it, but should we have the design done and maybe reconfigure it in such a fashion that the design is for 4 family restrooms, period? Can we do that?
Well, that would delay it by a full year.
I mean, either way, it's going to be a year for construction.
No,
That
but
would
it would
delay
delay it
it
another
to
year.
2 summers. If you just do the design now. Well, if you just design it now, you're gonna design it in this coming budget year. You can construct it in the following budget year.
Right.
You can't start and you don't get that following budget till 1 April. You can't construct it between 1 April and 30 May. So you don't want it under construction
So
during
it
the
wouldn't be
summer.
ready until the 22.
So you would lose a year by separating the design in one budget year and the construction in another budget year.
That's right.
Yeah.
So this proposal would have it ready for next summer.
21.
Correct. If you just do
So-
design, it's the summer of 20.
Is it
This
impossible?
proposal or some alteration. of
Correct.
this.
Well, that's right. I was just going to say, you could go to the engineer and ask them or the architect to redesign with that in mind, and perhaps we could come up with a slightly lower price
By April 1st.
by April, yeah, for this budget season.
I just want to go back to Edward's comment here, and it just seems fiscally prudent for this commission before having a consensus to move forward with either design or anything at this point on this project, to hear about all the other things that were put in here and look at the trade-offs. I mean, we have Baltimore Avenue's having all kind of sewer issues. All across the city, we're having serious sewer issues. Lake Gerard, we keep, for some reason, not funding, the dredging and that sort of thing that was recommended 3 years ago. So I think it seems we should wait until we hear about all these projects and then think about the trade-offs and determine if this is actually going to fall into one of our top budget priorities. I think you said it better than me, Edward, but
Yeah,
I personally am not ready to say this is one of the top priorities in the city when we're having infrastructure issues. We raise taxes, we raise wastewater rates. I'm not sure that there's not a better place for our limited revenue right now that'll help our residents more than this.
After the discussion of the last budget meeting, this was an addition that Kevin and Sharon put in, but there were other priorities
Right.
that the commissioners talked about that aren't on this list. So I'd like to hear the rationale of everything else, hear from us on what we think is a priority that hasn't been added, and then look at it all a little bit more holistically. And it comes down that, at the end of the day, we have decided what's a priority and what's not, and there's $400,000 left, then maybe we say, Kevin, can you go back and see if we can do something for $400,000 instead of $640? I mean, from a process standpoint, I think that's how we should be looking at this, not going line by line and saying, yes, let's include that or not include that. I'd rather listen to the
I don't think we've
rationale.
done
and
that. I
then-
mean, I think we've spent all this time working on options, sorting out options here, and then we move on to the next one, move on to the next one, and by the end of it, we'll have had a complete discussion. But, I mean, I'm glad to have all this information on this,
No,
without making a decision yet,
absolutely
just glad to
agreed,
have all the
yeah.
options.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah.
But
That's what you're saying.
Yeah, and then, but yeah, let's hear the others.
All right.
Yeah, We don't have time,
Yeah,
obviously,
so-
to spend an hour plus on each of these line items.
All right,
but
so why don't we,
This gets us there, and remember, this is only our second
Really.
second discussion in the month of January.
Right.
We've got a few more of these discussions coming up.
so why don't we just let the 640 float for right now? Let's just go down the line, if you would, Kevin, on the things that you have here. You've gone to the storm sewer, if you want to discuss that.
Sure. So last meeting, so 2 weeks ago, we talked about how we'd just focus on the assessment on the stormwater side. We pulled the 200 out and just left 50 so we could continue with our cleaning and inspection program. Well, the program's working because last week we got the results back on the stormwater system on Baltimore Avenue. So I just wanted to show you what we saw and the reason we put the 200 back into this year on the rehab side. So this, if you look on the little clip on the left, is our, that's the jetter you see there with the water spray, and then the camera follows behind them. And this is about, what's that, 11 feet or, I can't read the number, 14 feet or so in from the manhole close to the intersection of First and Baltimore. So we're going from First Street heading toward the ocean. So there's our jetter going down. He's cruising right along, leaving some residue, but what he does, he comes back and forth to get all the bottom residue out that gets left behind. But about 25 feet in, and we have something very similar to what we saw on Delaware Avenue, which is why we just did the lining project over there this year. But we've got two pipes coming right through our storm sewer. One we're pretty confident is a sewer lateral. We're not quite sure yet what the other one is. We're still investigating that. But two pipes just bored right through, our stormwater pipe. And that's, I guess, what's the restaurant down there? Eden? In the vicinity of Eden and I guess Clear Space on the other side. Right. And then, so continuing on down toward the ocean, our little guy's going back at it again, down around the 50, 60-foot mark, which if you remember, there's an electrical transformer over by that empty lot behind the sands. And we have an electrical duct bank running through our storm sewer.
Oh, my God.
So, yeah, so again, somehow they bored right through the stormwater pipe. So that's why I brought the 200,000 back into this year, because I think we need to go fix that. And, oh, by the way, you look up top on the, oops, sorry. So you go up top and look on the road, and you can see we've got two sinkholes that apparently the streets department has been filling and patching over the years. There's that first one right above where those two pipes intersect the storm sewer, and then here it's been patched at least twice, kind of where that duct bank is. So as the material sloughs in, sinkhole in the street, we throw material on top and patch the asphalt. So again, that's why that one's in there.
The solution on these types of things is that you'll either go under or over the lateral pipes?
Yes, for the most part. Although, with the pipes, it's hard because things that are flowing by gravity, you've got to keep a kind of a flat rate. The duct work needs to be relocated out of the storm sewer, and so we're working with Delmarva to see. There's some talk that they want to move it to the other side of the street anyway. So we're working through that process now. But ultimately, we got to fix those pipes and probably have to construct a manhole or a structure around the two sewer laterals. So that's why that one's back in. The board.
Sorry, just on that topic, and I think we talked a little bit about it when the issue on, it's at the end of Rehoboth or or Wilmington Ave, where there's, we believe some sewage is coming in. And
Rehoboth.
How that happened and who's liable for it. Is there any liability in terms of the cost of repairs? Obviously someone did something wrong that caused damage to our, the stormwater pipes. Is there any liability there for whoever did the damage? And
I would probably leave that to others to decide. Clearly, Delmarva is working with us. They understand that there's an issue with their duct banks that went through our storm sewer. So with respect to the other two, we don't know who the owner is yet, so we'll figure that out.
So this was just uncovered this past week. We consider this to be urgent. That's why we increased that line item. And again, the importance of why we need to continue with videoing all of the mains that we have.
Should this even wait till the next budget year, or should we take some of the revenue from, that we had from parking or otherwise that's in the general fund and shift it here? Like, how much of a priority is this to start like right now to fix this?
I don't think we could fix it right away. We got to get Delmarva. They've got, it's just the sequencing of it is going to take a while to happen.
Okay.
Doesn't look like it's going to fall in
Okay.
immediately, but
So even if you had the money today, it would still be, it's not going to make that much.
Correct. It's not going to accelerate it that much, although,
Okay.
yeah, we'll see if there's a possibility to get it done before the season. Otherwise, we'll look at, depending on what the fix is. If it's a lining job, we really could do it in the season, but probably wouldn't want to. But if you got to excavate and replace or install a structure, then we'd probably want to wait until, September, October to do that work.
And the 50,000 in there still covers additional assessments that are
Correct.
still going to be ongoing. The 200 is for the fix.
That's correct.
Okay.
And that's a programmatic amount we're trying to keep in so we can just work our way through the entire city.
So that 50,000 could uncover more problems.
I'm sure it will.
Yeah.
I'm sure it will.
But there's also another 460K for sewer line rehabilitation.
That's on the sanitary
Is
side.
that different on the, on the
That's
sanitary
sanitary sewer.
versus stormwater?
Right, and those, and again, that goes back to, the rate study. So that amount was built into the rate study, and it will allow us to do that. We did video King Charles recently, so we know we have some repair work to do there. But we've got the whole ongoing, this budget year's videoing still happening. So we'll wait and prioritize where we want to go fix with the amount we have for next year on the sewer side.
Do we also anticipate we're having these same problems on Rehoboth and/or Wilmington and/or any other?
We think the infrastructure on Rehoboth is significantly newer than the
Okay.
infrastructure on Baltimore and some of the others. So we don't really see, although we've videoed Rehoboth, and it's not as nice as it should be at
And how about
9 or 10 years
Wilmington?
old. Wilmington, we just lined the upper
Yeah.
part of Wilmington, so we should be good there.
Should be okay with what you'd already did.
Right. Next up was the boardwalk recycling, which I guess we had a lot of encouragement to get that put back in. We're still working with the Beach and Boardwalk Committee on the color scheme for the cans, but I think they'll have a recommendation for you after their next meeting. But then that and the vehicle that goes with that to help us kind of segregate the regular trash from the recycled trash.
Great.
And Kevin, the yellow top container, the recycling container, it's hard to discern from here, but the hole in it,
Correct, it's clearly and it's got a
It's only for
4-inch hole for
plastic
bottles.
bottles and cans.
Correct, right. And then the thing we don't have on yet are the labeling for, those kinds of things, but
Right.
yeah, in the process of looking at those.
And that would go into
Correct, this year.
This season, yeah, okay.
And the number of containers would match the number of trash.
That's
gar-
correct.
Garbage.
About
cans.
125 or
About
so on the boardwalk.
125 during the season.
Just on the boardwalk,
Right.
not the beach.
Right.
Now, the line above that, you took off the roll-off container. What
Correct.
was that?
But we felt we could defer that.
Okay, okay.
Just looks bad. Maybe we'll paint it.
Still, it's nice to see a savings in there. too.
Correct.
Okay.
The speed cushion, I guess there's been a desire to install a speed cushion similar to the one, that's the one on Columbia. There's a desire to put one on Henlopen Avenue as well. I'm not sure of the location. I think the chief has picked the spot.
How do you make that determination that you put it in the budget and now you take it away?
Please,
We're not allowed to ask questions on these items, sir.
please, we're having our discussion.
I actually had that question, so I'll ask it. I mean, I think the speed, are there any metrics that show the success of it on Columbia? I mean, I think just anecdotally, I've seen cars slow down on Columbia. I think it's been a good thing. I'm just wondering, have we let the Henlopen residents know that this is something planned? Have we gotten their feedback? What's the chief say about, the impact of this? It just seems,
We
it
have
just hasn't
received
been
feedback.
communicated much. What?
Yes, we have received positive feedback.
On Columbia.
And it has slowed some of the traffic
Yeah,
down.
it has.
So,
Chief said that at the last
can't put them everywhere, but
Yeah.
at least for that area. And the chief did look at that. He agrees that, it's a good measure for traffic calming.
And remind me, what's the location here? Between
Yeah, I don't have the exact location. The chief did some measuring out there.
The chief and I went out one morning. It was actually one of the mornings that it had snowed And we kind of drove Henlopen Avenue several times back and forth. And we had initially chose a proposed location of the area between 98 and 92 Henlopen Avenue. The reason for that being that the area is approximately halfway between the stop signs that are located at Easton Street as well as Second Street. So some traffic can pick up speed between those two stop signs. And then additionally, we thought that it could help calm traffic on Henlopen Avenue for vehicles that are turning off of or onto 3rd Street and Girard Street.
Thank you. I forgot that you went out there.
I'll let Evan discuss the virtual parking solution.
So the virtual parking permit, this is sort of a follow-up to, I think, some discussion that had taken place a couple meetings ago about potentially transitioning our physical permit system to a virtual parking permit system. The benefit of this, obviously, is that business owners, property owners, visitors, everybody would be able to purchase their parking permit online. The benefit for the visitors is, and really for everybody, is that we get several requests every year as to whether or not people can purchase their permits in advance of coming to the city. We received an email just the other day about whether or not that could be done. This online system would allow us to basically use our existing Munis software to input eligible groups that are eligible for parking permits into the system. So essentially they could go online, have a username, log in, and then acquire their permits from the online system. It would also streamline our staff operation. So by creating efficiencies, so no longer would we have to purchase every single year the physical permits. We spend approximately $18,000 every single year purchasing the physical permits. We also mail all the transferable permits to everyone. And then we also receive and review required documentation for non-transferable permits. And then from there, we issue the non-transferable permits as well. So again, they'd be able to purchase their permits online, streamline the entire parking operation as well. So the virtual parking permit would integrate very well with our license plate recognition system. So essentially, the LPR system is sort of the wave in parking technology. A lot of communities have been doing LPR for many years now. So essentially, this would allow the entire city to become license plate recognition. So your plate is your permit. No more physical permits, no more space numbers, anything like that. It would also enable people to transfer permits as needed, so they could simply go online, reassign a vehicle to a permit. And it would also be better for our enforcement staff. So currently, the way that our staff enforces the permit area is that we have individuals riding on bikes. You'll oftentimes see them going up and down the street, and they have to physically turn their head to look on the vehicle to see if they can see the transferable or the non-transferable. We have concerns all the time about somebody not properly displaying their permit or forgetting to display it, or they ran inside to get the permit. In the meantime, they were issued a ticket. There's certainly stopping on the street or on the sidewalk for the enforcement officer who has to issue the citation. So essentially, it would streamline staff operations. It would make it much easier for people interested in purchasing permits to do so online. A lot more flexibility in terms of assigning vehicles to the permits, and overall, I think, do away with a lot of the concerns about enforcement, such as properly displaying it, things like that. So.
Will this allow for residents? So awesome job. I just really commend you and the parking department for always being innovative. I know I say that all the time, but wow, you've done this right. You've looked at process, you've looked at technology, combined the two, talked to people, just the way a top tier project should be run for any organization. So thank you for that, and thank the parking department. Will this take away the requirement for the residents to come in and show the registration? Is there a way to do this online now?
Correct.
As opposed to having to come in?
Correct. So we're still in the process of, identifying exactly how best to manage the permit process. But essentially if we were to continue to do non-transferable permits the way that they operate now, It would allow residents the opportunity to upload their documentation. We would be able to go in every single day and view the documentation and then just issue it from there. Again, there's no mailing of physical permits. We just push a button and then their plate is essentially in the system and they now have a valid permit. There's also the ability to just simply do away with the non-transferable component, so we wouldn't require any documentation. We would just issue a certain number of permits, and then at any point, vehicles can be changed on that permit. So the virtual permit kind of serves the benefit of the transferable and the non-transferable. So they're transferable in the sense that if you need to reassign a vehicle to that permit, you're renting a car, or you purchased a new car, or you have friends coming down and you're going to move your car into the driveway, you can do so. At the same time, if you benefit from the non-transferable permit, you would just go on, assign your vehicle information to that permit, and you wouldn't have to change it.
I mean, you presented on this last time, but I thought you said it wouldn't go into, that there were a lot of logistical issues and it wouldn't go into effect now. You were looking at it for the following year just to sort out all those issues. Is
Correct.
that not still the case?
So
or-
we were looking to put the funds in the budget for the next fiscal year with hopes of implementing it in the summer of
21.
21.
One, okay, okay. Because it would involve, it does involve changing the process too. In other words, it involves changing it from an unlimited number of non-transferables to basically two, like the parking committee recommended, along with two transferables, meaning every household would get four.
Correct. And we've spent, several months going back and forth with the vendor, essentially trying to work with them to identify the best system that's
Yeah,
not going to create inefficiencies or just duplicate what we already do. So certainly we have that capability to continue doing it the way that we're doing it, but it just simply wouldn't be efficient or effective to go to a virtual system, but still issue the permits.
I mean, I think it's great to go, it's always a hassle every year to come in with a copy of your registration and all that. So I think it's wonderful to go to a virtual system. I do think there's as an education process there with homeowners, it's probably a steep curve in some respects. And also, you had mentioned that this saves money on staff time and other things. Is any way to know, I mean, because it sounds like it would net out, and it actually wouldn't be much of an expense at all ultimately, right?
Correct. So I haven't yet calculated the amount of staff time that would probably be saved. But certainly and the education component is certainly something that we're gonna, have to explore. We have been in conversations with the University of Delaware and some other cities as well, including the city of Baltimore, about their virtual parking permit system. And we've gotten a lot of really good input on how we can communicate this new technology. But yeah, essentially we think that, overall, just the sheer time spent mailing permits, reviewing documentation, mailing additional permits, having people come in to provide documentation would cut back significantly on staff time.
And
I think the nice thing about, Evan, you've done a great job. You did an excellent job explaining this at the last meeting as well. And I'm glad to see that we're doing it sooner than later. And one of the nice things about making, I think, a pretty small investment in this type of technology, the tangible, besides time, the tangible cost savings is there. We're saving money on postage. We're saving money on the cost of printing passes. So I think it's a no-brainer, and I think you've done an excellent job. Thank you.
Thank you. So the image shown here is essentially just what a parking portal looks like. This is from the University of Delaware. I personally use the system myself as a student. Thought it was extremely helpful and efficient. But the parking portal, the first portion above the line is essentially what we have now. So anybody who receives a citation can enter their citation number or their plate number. They can go in and they can either pay for their citation or they can appeal the citation. So by going towards a virtual parking permit solution, it would just add that second layer at the bottom there, which now has the capability to also receive your permits as well.
I assume that people who are unable to do this for themselves can come into City Hall
Absolutely.
and someone will take care of it.
Absolutely. Yep.
Great.
But again, this isn't implemented this summer. It's hopefully for next seasons. We
I
need
think
to
it's
work
good.
out again the fine tuning with,
That's good. Yeah.
the parking committee suggestions and the fact that the commissioners, at least right now, did not want to go to limiting the number of permits, so. Okay.
I think Liz is going to talk to us about the tot lot at Lake Gerard.
And thank you to Kevin for putting together such a nice slideshow for me. Um, So I went over it some last time. I can add some new elements to it. I did go out and we took some new pictures of the extent of the rust. So Kevin can fast forward through some of those. And I have explained that this is not necessarily a maintenance issue. This playground is past an expected lifespan. We expect 15, we hope for 20, we're at 20. So this is nothing that we couldn't have projected happening. And in looking at other playgrounds, they're old too, guys, 2004, 2005, okay? So we have to get prepared. These are costs we are gonna face if we wanna continue providing these services to our residents and visitors. Now, whether or not it's more important than relining sewer pipes, that is why we have all you wonderful people here and Kevin and the city manager. I'm here to tell you why this is important for our park system and our residents and visitors. And just to make clear, think about it money-wise. When we did Grove Park, 2005, we did the main part of the playground. 2008, we did the fitness center. We spent $150,000 on that, okay? This is 2004, 5, 2008. Prices have increased, okay? Natural inflation. And so what we get with this playground, if you can see, we do have a larger structure, larger swing set. We have a big rope climber. We have if you see the orange swing, that is actually an inclusive swing, so for children who can't utilize their traditional swing seat. And then there's also, if you look kind of in the back right corner, popping out, that is a glider, so that anybody who has a disability is able to access that via wheelchair, crutches, braces, and parents are actually able to go on that with the children as well, or grandparents if they need extra support. Same with the little orange spinner with the gray bottom, you can roll right onto that. So anybody with a disability is able to utilize that. And that's also why you see we did partial ramping. So we didn't do full ramping because of budget, but that is all part of being an inclusive playground. Now, if we wanted to replace exactly what was there, we'd spend $60,000 just to replace the structure, the main structure that's there. That's not the swings, that's not the couple of little bouncy car things we have. $60,000, and we still won't meet ADA standards. We still won't meet ASTM, and we still won't meet the city's goal overall of being more inclusive. I think former commissioner got up here and said it well. This is our goal, is that everybody can access our facilities, whether it's a trolley or a playground or a restroom or the beach. And we've made great strides. And I think if you look at the usage of the beach wheelchairs and the Moby mats, that speaks for itself. There's a demand for this stuff. And to tell people, I'm sorry, we're not going to provide an inclusive playground is essentially saying we don't want you here. And we do. We want everyone to come here and enjoy themselves. And unfortunately, it costs a lot. There's no getting around it. So I'm going to say, and also the other main thing on this playground that none of our other ones have is the poured-in-place surfacing. And I brought a couple of samples so you guys can see it. I'll make it available if you want to pass it around.
What do you call this? What'd you call it?
It's called poured-in-place surfacing. So
Poured in place, okay.
when you want true accessibility, you have two options. You have that, and you have fake grass, okay, AstroTurf. And the cost is about the same on both of them. The AstroTurf, the fake grass, is just too slippery. That's the main complaint. Any little bit of moisture from the ocean or dew, and we have liability with that. And it has been proven over a 20-year period, although the poured-in-place has a high upfront cost. Every year the city spends, we contract out $7,000 in replacing the engineered wood fiber for our playgrounds. And it's still not truly accessible at that. So over a 20-year period, the labor of the maintenance of the wood fiber, the port in place ends up being cheaper. And, you know, it comes in all different colors. It's permeable. It has a better cushioning factor. So the minute when we put down the engineered wood fibers, you have to have, I think it's at least a 9-inch cushion for safety of the fall height of our structures. So we make sure that we have 12 inches. So the minute they put it down, it compacts and we're back at 9. So every week I send out my one crew guy and he fluffs it back up. And the minute somebody steps on it, it pushes it back down. So basically the minute they apply it, we have it installed, there's no warranty. It's automatically right back down. So it's a much safer, smoother surface.
Is this the same that's at the elementary school?
Yes, very similar. Mm-hmm.
So, Liz, is the brown part on this photo or this diagram, is that the current playground as it is today, and then the blue is added?
I think that, remember, this is a rendering, and we gave our playground guy like 5 seconds to do this, and I think it's wonderful. But I think it's representing the fact that we took a cost savings measure on the swing set area and made that a loose fill rubber. Now, if we're able to get grants and donations, as we have in the past, we could upgrade that and make it better. But it also represents that we wanted to do a more coastal theme with the city colors and make it more reminiscent of the beach. So the blue and the beige is sand, too.
So this is in the same footprint now?
It's larger.
It is?
How much larger? Yeah.
It's going to end up being a little under 1/4 acre playground, so double, triple, somewhere like that.
It's double or
Significantly.
triple what's there now?
Yeah, well,
Okay, are you taking out trees?
if they expand, those invasive black pines, at least one side of them would have to be removed.
Are they going to be replaced?
That's part of the overall Lake Girard plan. So landscaping would be a bigger piece of it.
Does it have to be double or triple the size?
If you want to have clearances and access, it has
Really?
to be about double that size. Yeah, because of all the ramps. And if you
Right.
look at what's there now, it is significantly smaller than our other playgrounds. This will be comparable in size to them.
Well, I'm looking for some way to maybe reduce the cost a little bit, as well as, I understand maybe that you don't want to save the trees that are there, but I think we need to replace them with something nearby
we
without
can-
waiting for the bigger plan.
Yeah, well, I think
We're always taking out, we're never putting back. I worry about that.
Well, I would strongly disagree with that, number one, because in my last calculations, the city has planted 3 trees on city property for every 1 removed. I haven't updated that in about a half a year. But
Okay.
my thought
That
is,
makes
I
me
think
feel better.
I feel strongly that in the past, if you look at our parks, things have been added haphazardly, whether it's a tree or a walkway or a bed. And going forward, it makes much more sense for us to have these comprehensive plans to guide what we're doing and be more cost efficient. So we are not putting in 3 trees that 2 years later we're like, oh, now they're in the way again and they don't match our overall plan. That being said, landscaping would be a portion of this. So, and I'm not saying we couldn't come up with an overall tree plan as part of the playground.
Will this be fenced like the other one or no?
So we kind of had a little bit of back and forth discussion on this because generally fenced-in parks are perceived to be non-inviting. But if you have a more well-traveled road, you have to provide it's not a requirement in the safety standards for playgrounds, but thinking rationally about it, you want some sort of barrier. And so the last decision we made on it was to provide a linear, simple split wood rail fence that we can do all in-house for, I think it was less than $1,000, as a barrier between the playground and Lake Avenue. And then we'll soften that up with some landscaping, whether it's a few trees and some ornamental grasses and some maybe native flowers. So we factored that all in there. It's just a very minimal cost compared to the playground.
So looking at I think it's a nice plan, but I'm wondering, and I would think that the answer would be yes, but phasing this, so we somewhat replace what's there now with some ability for making it ADA accessible, and then, maybe next year doing phase two. I mean, it may not be 125 and 125, but,
Oh, it certainly wouldn't be, no.
No, but I'm just saying, some sort of cost savings. That would be my suggestion.
We've never done that in the past with any of our playgrounds, but that doesn't mean it's not possible. I mean, I would have to think about, because we still have to, any way you look at it, we would be losing pieces. Like, say we do the main structure, then we won't have any swings, and we'd have to do the, all the entries and everything. Because right now, you can't even get to the playground. The entry is 50 feet of like sandy grass, so, and then once you get inside the gate, there's a wooden bulkhead, so you can't even get into the playground itself if you had any sort of disability. But yeah, I mean, we can talk to them. Fiscally, that doesn't, the sum of the parts is greater than the sum of the whole, but if we're looking to make concessions, it's certainly something we can ask about. I'm just not sure how effective it would be.
Are there grant fund possibilities for things like this?
Yes, so if you look back over the city's history with the ORPT grant through DENREC, we have received significant grant funding for all of our playground projects, as well as restrooms and a couple other things in
When
there.
you say significant, what, to cover half of it?
50%.
Oh, okay.
Now,
So that's possible here?
Oh, yeah.
yeah,
Okay.
We'd be looking at that.
Oh,
yes,
great.
certainly.
and we certainly have our grant expert sitting
Yeah,
there,
yeah,
Evan.
no, I know.
And in the past, when they built the original Lake Jar Tot lot, or the revamping, I should say, when they redid it in 2000, I think they finished in 2001, I think the city received about $25,000 in donations as well. So don't underestimate the power of that. And I think we discussed it in our last meeting, is that, and Commissioner Slosser had a good point, is show me the grant funding now, and
Right, yeah.
we can't rely on that funding
So that's
to
why we have to
fund
put
our
this in
project.
the
We have
budget
to
and then-
show, we have to show our dedicated funds that we have the money to pull this off, and the community is behind it, and the commissioners are behind it before they're going to give us any grant funding.
Well, I'm sorry, Susan, did you have more
That's
questions?
fine, go ahead.
You actually turned my thinking around a little bit, Liz, so that was a
Making
good,
progress,
That was a
yes.
good, halfway, you got me halfway. Do
Well,
you
give me
think-
another 5 minutes.
You're good. I like the inclusiveness nature and making this handicapped accessible. I think that's absolutely critical. What would you think about if and I don't know where anybody else is, if we said something like, okay, we'll put 125 into this in the budget, and you have to go get grant money or contributions, like, and I'm just making up 125. I have no idea what's, in the big picture. Do we need more in stormwater, or do we need, whatever else? But would that at least get us down the road to having more of a justification for grants or for some other investment? I mean, what do you think about a strategy along those lines?
I would love to say, let's just do all of this right now, but I understand that municipal budgets and priorities take place, and I think if we said we're going to commit $225,000 and we don't get any grant funding or any donations, we'll cut the play structure and the inclusive swing, right? So right there, we can make it work for that, but we're cutting things that I think our community direly needs. We're talking about infrastructure. I could give you a 10-minute spiel on why parks and playgrounds should be considered infrastructure. They are essential to community and social engagement and children's play and education. Yep. Are they a stormwater pipe? No.
No, but I think parks and I love your idea of having a grand plan for the parks and having an incremental implementation. I think that's outstanding. One of our best assets here in the city, of course, parks, all of our parks. So back to that, you got me halfway. So what if we said, okay, 125? I mean,
I'll take whatever you're giving.
and then okay, all right.
But
So
would you then be able to go out and get grant money? That wouldn't limit the grant opportunities, I guess is what you're
No.
asking.
yeah, exactly.
No, and if
Exactly.
and if for some reason we were unable to get grant, say everything fell apart and ORPT they've shut off that grant program that's been existing for 40 years or whatever, we could still figure something out with
something
$225,000. Like I said, we would cut,
Or
say
125.
125.
So you're saying the least you want, you
No, I'm just saying 125 is, I don't think that'll get us anything we want, to be honest.
And you could possibly get another 100 in grants or contributions or something. I guess that's where my mind's going.
I mean,
We showed the city's commitment of X number.
I would hope we could, but if something came through for 100,000, like I said, it's 60 just to replace the sad little tiny structure that's there, and that doesn't include any access, any of the bulkheading and stuff like that. So we would be looking at 100 just to replace exactly.
What's the timing? I mean, is that something you're going to do for this season?
We potentially could. I would have to work more with our supplier. It depends on the ordering of the parts, but it just could go either way, honestly. It's not out of the question that we couldn't get it done in like 2 months, we'll say.
But
And
it's
that's what
possible
our
for this
consultant
season.
said. We met with the consultant who designed this, and we've been working with for many years. They are on the state contract, point that out,
Is
and
great,
we've
yeah.
used them. So that eliminates the bidding requirement. And when we spoke to him, he said that, possibly by June that it could be done. This also includes, Liz, correct me if I'm wrong, the demo of the existing equipment.
Yes, so the demolition was included in the estimate. For being a valued client, he gave us $10,000 off automatically, and then we're also on the state contract, and this is the only playground company in Delaware that is on state contract, and one of the only 2 out of several that actually provides everything we need on state contract in terms of repairs, maintenance, equipment replacement, and install. So
Liz and Sharon, could you just clarify again kind of the status of the current equipment? Because one of our constituents this week, just a few days ago, sent several of us some photos of the existing equipment and said, gee, it doesn't look so bad. Why?
what do you think of the photos I just were on there?
So I think it's just important to emphasize, how liable we may be currently, given the status of the equipment. But we understand that disabled kids,
Short of not beating the
get into
ADA.
it.
Well, but because the playground is so old, many of the parts aren't made anymore, like a lot of the connectors and like the deck, none of that's done. It is so old, it doesn't meet the current playground safety requirements, and it would throw in that term that everyone would love, the grandfathering in. But in terms, I think in any playground is a high liability. So as soon as you do I do my inspection and everything's all good, the minute I walk off of that playground, there's no warranty, there's nothing like that. If somebody gets hurt, the city is liable, and thankfully we've not had any of those incidents. And the reason we're here is to meet several of these goals that I've enumerated to you, but also we don't want to wait till our equipment is a major liability before we replace it.
Right.
So we're getting to this in the appropriate time frame, and we, got a lot of life use out of this playground, a lot of years, and considering the coastal exposure, anybody who lives on an ocean block can tell you everything goes bad faster there, unfortunately.
It hasn't gotten 20 years out.
It's right. I mean, we've really experienced great longevity with our playgrounds, and they take maintenance. For example, Grove Park this year, just in time for the warranty, we had to have a whole piece of decking replaced that would have probably cost us $10,000. Okay, so you got to stay on top of these things.
So this current assessment, is really important. I think when the press reports on it, helps people understand why we're looking at a potential expenditure like this, how critical it is. I mean, not only for the aesthetics of the city, the beauty of our city, the enjoyment of our parks and playgrounds, but for safety,
Yeah. So you have all the
accessibility.
niceties, the fact that the current playground is less than beautiful. Yes, it is very, very small. It's hidden behind trees, but in terms of safety factors. We're not there yet to the point where we have to close it. So I don't want anybody saying, oh my God, I can't take my child there. But if you went to that playground and you saw a main support beam with that amount of rust, would you want your child or grandchild on it? You're going to take them down to Grove. You'll get them in the car and take them to Grove or
It's
Stokely.
unlikely it would pass any current safety kind of inspection or standards.
Well, the current ones, because they've changed.
Yeah.
And as safety standards are likely to do, they increase with.
I think it's part of our overall goal to be inclusive too, with the restrooms are, we want the
Yeah,
streets to be ADA.
I mean,
with
the inclusivity
everything.
goes.
Yeah.
I mean, we're working on other projects where we're adding a bench somewhere. Well, we're not just putting a bench. We're putting a bench that has a concrete pad with room for a wheelchair next to it. And then the bench has a back and armrests. So anybody who struggles a little getting up and down, which is probably most of us, have support. So it's the big details like the playground, but it's also the little things as well. Drinking fountains, benches. I mean, there's so much to think about and so much to learn, and the guidelines and best practices, just like talking about gender neutral restrooms, are constantly changing. 5 years ago, I don't think you would have seen one of those. Any other questions?
Good job, Liz.
Excellent.
Great.
plan.
Thank you, Liz.
You can tell I feel strongly about this,
Yeah,
right?
Thanks for the education about the trees too.
Before we go anything forward with suggestions from the commissioners, whatever, can we have the Main
Yes.
Street people come up just
Yes.
because, rather than keep them
Yes,
here much
that's
longer?
great. So
isn't it?
we're in the contribution donation section now. We ask the library representatives and also Main Street. How are you?
Good, and yourself?
Good. So please introduce yourselves and.
Yeah, let's do that. That's a good idea.
Up to you.
Yeah, it's a good idea. Sure, it'd be great.
I'm Tucker Kochon, President of the Board of Trustees of the Rehoboth Beach Library.
And I'm Allison Miller. I'm the Library Director of the Rehoboth Beach Public Library. We send our request for $30,000 to help support our library operations. This year, we have continued our growth. I also brought in a copy of our report from our last fiscal year, FY 2019, which runs from June to July, and I'll hand those out. You'll hand those out to everybody. And in this current year, FY 20, we also have continued our growth. This previous year, we started opening up early. We started beat the meter hours. So we started opening up at 9 during the summers, 2 days a week, and we're looking to expand those operations. And opening up that extra hour a couple days a week will also incur more costs to the library, so we'll need more funds to help support that.
Some of the things that I've heard this morning are, want to have an asset that will draw visitors and also be able to meet the needs of our residents. And clearly, we think the library falls in that category. We feel like we're an institution in downtown Rehoboth Beach, and we want to continue to improve and expand our offerings so we can meet everybody's needs. But it does require more money, and we have a lot of challenges ahead of us, so that's why we're asking for the $30,000.
Is that different from last year?
Last year was $15,000,
request-
yes.
Last year was
And we
15.
did increase that last year.
I'm sorry?
We did increase that.
I believe it was increased like 3 years prior to that.
Yes, last
It used to be
year-
12,000.
Last year, we asked for 24, received 15,
Right,
and this year we're asking for 30.
correct.
There are a lot of reasons why we need additional funding. The major one is that this past year, we took the step of moving our employees onto the county library pay scale. As you may or may not know, Rehoboth Beach is an independent library. There are 11 of them in the county. There are 3 county libraries whose employees are paid on a county scale. our employees, especially the lower levels, fell far below those wage scales. So we want to, in 2 years, move them to the county wage scale.
Is that the majority of the 15K increase that you're asking for?
That move this year is costing us in the range of 30,000, and it'll be an additional 30,000 next year.
Well,
I'm looking at your funding list here in the annual report. Thank you for handing this out. Are the other public entities, county and state, increasing their amount to you in this next fiscal year?
We haven't gotten official numbers yet. We are going to them as independent libraries. All the independent libraries in Sussex County are coming together and getting together and ask for both the county and the state is coming together to the state and going together as an ask. Last year, the ask to the state was $1 million.
So the ask was 1 million, but you received just shy of 58,000, is that?
The ask that we asked to the state is for the entire state of Delaware, since we are a statewide consortium.
Okay.
And then that is
And then-
divided based on a formula.
Sure. And then what, I understand the Friends, those are donations from donors. What is the library line item?
The library, that is what we raised based on fines, fees, donations, and our ongoing book sale.
Okay, so that's separate from the Friends?
Yes.
Okay.
The Friends is a separate organization. They have their own 501c3.
And they do a 5K, right?
They do a 5K, and they have
used
a
to.
annual cocktail party, and they also have a membership. They actually support 100% of the collection at the Rehoboth Beach Public Library and 100% of the programs that we have at the library as well.
Thank you.
And they've been a very active organization, especially in the last 5 years. When I first joined the board, probably 7 or 8 years ago, I think our contribution from the Friends was about $10,000, and it just ramped up rapidly. It would take a long time to explain how different libraries are funded in Delaware. And I don't even understand a lot of it, but it's important to note that in Sussex County, there are 11 independent libraries. There are 3 county libraries. The county libraries are fully funded by the county. The independent libraries are funded by state, county, local, Friends, any place we can get funding.
Which are the 3 county libraries?
They are Milton, South Coastal, and Greenwood.
South Coastal is located?
Bethany.
Okay, all right, thank you.
And that's partly why we're moving to the county pay grades, because 2 county libraries are in our jurisdiction.
What caused the significant increase? I know you added more programs, but I'm looking on this classes and events page in FY19. That's amazing. I mean, what, 75% increase in
Yeah,
attendance? Is
we-
that, if my math's right, that's amazing.
We hired a couple new staff members,
Okay.
and we made programming a priority at our library, and
Wow.
yeah,
That's amazing.
it was the
I
staff that
mean,
made the difference.
Wow.
Yeah, I think that's an important point.
Yeah.
Our staff, the level of contribution of our staff is much higher now than it's been in the past, and we want to make sure that we maintain and keep that staff. They're excellent.
What, just out of curiosity, youth attendance bumping from like roughly 2,300 to 5,100 at events. What programs prompted that increase in youth attendance?
We started doing more outreach to the schools.
Schools. Okay. Wow, that's great. That's great.
Allison, how long have you been there?
I've been director for
years?
5 years.
5 years, okay. So I attribute much of this to Allison and her efforts since she's
As
been
do
there.
I.
Yes.
I just think having a library in any town is one of the most critical community assets. Again, back to your comment, you know, to draw in the visitors and also to support the full-time residents and the part-time residents. I just think not meager, and I don't mean that in any way. Every penny counts, but I mean, I think the return on the investment would get even for another 15K contribution. Personally, I'm very much in support of that, but that's just me. I think we're getting, I mean, I think these stats show the value that we're getting and show how that we can grow the value if we
Yeah, I couldn't
continue
agree more.
investing.
It's really, I use the library a lot myself.
Me too.
And,
I go there a lot.
and at
It's
the
awesome.
farmer's market, we have a summer program where someone
Yes.
from, from the library comes and reads to the kids, and she's very, very good, and people love it.
And all the events that bring the community together, and to Sharon's point, I credit obviously you in bringing this in. So personally, I'm in support of continuing to.
Yeah, I think we're very
increase the funding.
fortunate to have you here and the commitment that you all have to expand services and programming for adults as well as the youth. And so I agree with what the other commissioners have said. I think that it's a pretty inexpensive investment for the return that we get.
A really important part of the community. I agree with everything that's been said.
Thank you.
Well,
Thank
thank
you.
you. Appreciate
Thank
the
you.
comments and appreciate
Thanks for your time.
Thank you.
Thanks for all you're doing.
Yeah, impressive.
And Main Street is next?
Hello, everyone. Thank you for inviting us today to be here. I want to introduce our president. This is Greer Mandeville.
Good morning.
And this is Walt Castle, our treasurer of Rehoboth Beach.
Good morning.
Morning.
So I have a few items to go over, and I'm going to read. And on the behalf of Rehoboth Beach Main Street Board of Directors, I'm requesting that Rehoboth Beach Main Street be included in the City of Rehoboth Beach 2020 annual budget in the amount of $60,000. We are honored to have the continued support from you in the City of Rehoboth Beach. Your investment in Rehoboth Beach Main Street is greatly appreciated. As you are aware, Rehoboth Main Street is an accredited nonprofit organization with a Main Street America program. And in the beginning, I forgot that I'm Dan Slagle, the Executive Director of Rehoboth Main Street. Sorry, I forgot to introduce myself, but I want to bring that up. Main Street is a national program that has been helping revitalize downtown commercial districts for more than 40 years. We're excited. This is the 40th anniversary of Main Street. So we're working on a campaign right now. In 2019, more than 1,600 neighborhoods and communities followed the Main Street comprehensive four-point approach to successfully economic revitalization of downtown commercial districts. Rehoboth Beach Main Street programs and activities are designed to assist and support downtown Rehoboth Beach businesses, owners, entrepreneurs, and property owners. Promote a positive image of downtown Rehoboth Beach as a great place to live, visit, and shop. Assist with the beautification of downtown area. Encourage the involvement of all community stakeholders. In 2019, under the guidance of a 13-member board of directors and a full-time director, more than 70 community volunteers contributed 3,400 hours. According to the independent sector, the value of a volunteer hour in 2019 was over $25 per hour, which would make the RBMS volunteer contribution to this city of Rehoboth Beach about $86,000. So our 2019 activities included the sign and awning matching grant program. We implemented the 2019 College and Town Awards, which highlighted preservation and rehab projects. Created the Rehoboth in Bloom subcommittee to beautify the downtown streetscape. Planters placed with flowers were located on the first 2 blocks of Rehoboth Avenue and it is maintained year-round. This was a huge success for Rehoboth. We're very proud. The Summer Banner Project was a huge success. When you went down Rehoboth Avenue, all the beautiful banners. We met and worked with Delmarva Power and City of Rehoboth Beach to provide LED lighting on Wilmington and Baltimore Avenue. We revamped the Rehoboth Beach Main Street membership program, and I'm very excited to tell you we more than doubled our RBMS business partners and residential memberships this past year. We updated the RBMS website. We hired a social media consultant to maintain our Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter accounts. We created a meet and greet for the RBMS executive director so I could be able to meet different business owners and the residents. We held 2 RBS fundraisers, which included the Community Unity Dinner, and we had a fundraiser at Dogfish Grill. We have 3 times the number of volunteers than we did last year on our RBMS committee. We had to purchase and use Track It Forward because of the growth in our volunteers. We began to create a volunteer management manual because we've had so many volunteers come on board, which we're very excited about. We have a meet and greet downtown business owners events. We co-sponsored with the SBDC quarterly business assistant workshops for it we've provided for the businesses downtown. We worked with the University of Delaware students to conduct a visitor/shopper survey in April 2019. We obtained a map to track downtown commercial property vacancies. We hosted a stop and go shop event at the RBMS Main Street office on Black Friday and on Small Business Saturday, at which time shoppers were provided with coupons for downtown businesses as well as a complimentary refreshments. Penny Lane Mall co-sponsored complimentary gift wrapping stations throughout the holiday retail season. All the businesses did well along Penny Lane. Feedback from the merchants was it was like a summer night, which I was very proud. We had our annual Cocoa Crawl that we brought back. That was a huge success. We promoted local merchants campaign. In 2020, we look forward to working closely with our downtown business owners, property owners, and residents as we expand some of our past 2019 activities and new programming, such as Board of Directors strategic planning, including revisiting current transformation strategies for RBMS organization, create volunteer recognition events, completing our volunteer manual, also developing an annual RBS signature fundraising event, expanding RBMS membership program. Also, I want to come out with a newsletter to inform our community what is going on downtown and as far as the events and different things going on around town. Continue to find more diverse grant and sponsorship opportunities. I think it's very important to mention we are working on getting grants and sponsorships. We want to use Track It Forward more for our volunteers. We have an app in place working on creating a downtown coupon book, expanding the Rehoboth and Bloom beautification program, implementing a storefront design program, enlarging the scope of our sign and awning matching program. We want to give out four awards were given out last year. We want to give out more awards this year. Working with Rehoboth Beach Historical Society to create a historical preservation awareness, maintaining a vacancy inventory, continue the quarterly business assistant workshops, creating the networking opportunity with businesses and property owners. One thing that's really important for us too is we plan to work with the city and the Jolly Trolley on finding funding sources for the future. We will also increase our social media outreach on info and education regarding parking and busing. And final, I just want to thank again the City of Rehoboth, Mayor Paul Coons, City Manager Sharon Lynn, and the commissioners for your support in 2019. And we look forward to another successful year of an economic revitalization in 2020 with your continued support. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions?
Any questions? I'm sorry.
Sorry?
What specifically would the 10K increase go towards? I think you said it, but if you could just summarize it again real quick for me, specifically. Is it
I'm
in
sorry,
here
what was the question again?
you're asking for additional 10K over what you asked for last year?
As we continue to grow, we want to create more events for downtown.
Events.
You know, also with our new website, increase our social media, also our signature fundraising events. You know, we want to, we got me as a paid employee. We have other things that we're expenditures on too. So there's some of the things to highlight.
I have some questions. I don't know if you have the answers off the top of your head, so if you don't.
We have our city liaison.
You talked about the 70 volunteers and the 3,400 hours. How many of those were specific to Rehoboth and Bloom? Do you have a sense if it was like 3/4 of the volunteers or it's
I've had I'm sorry? 6 or 7. 6 or 7, yeah.
6 or 7 what?
Yeah, 6, you were asked the number of volunteers? I'm sorry.
For Rehoboth and Bloom specifically?
Yeah, it was about 6 or 7 volunteers for that.
I thought they had like.
No, it's a lot more. If we had to
Remember
guess,
confused about
I
the
would-
question.
We have a lot of, I think we can talk about, we have a lot of committees that are involved, and we
Yeah.
have a variety of volunteers in various
Right.
committees. So, I mean, you could go over the committees and what committees we have, but we've seen an influx of people that are interested in the city, residents and business owners that get involved, and it's incredible to see the amount of volunteer time that people care and they want to be part of the city and believe in what we're doing for the city, so.
Well, that's what I was getting at,
And
because
there's
Rehoboth
various
and Bloom
committees.
was
There's a promotion
wildly
committee, yeah.
successful and was just,
Yeah, yeah.
was a wonderful program. And the sense I had is that it had quite a few
Yeah, I
volunteers.
heard a lot
just
from the
wondered if maybe
residents and
most of yours
businesses as
came
well,
from
yeah.
there.
Say 20,
Yeah,
20
at
plus.
least, yes.
Yeah.
I understand now.
Volunteers.
One day I was helping out, it was 20 volunteers showed up.
Right, yeah, yeah. So a
fluctuates,
lot
yeah.
of the efforts of it. And did they form a separate 501c3?
They're a subcommittee, and no, they did not.
No, it's all part of Rehoboth Beach
Okay,
Main Street,
okay,
yeah.
so it's just-
And we
it's just a
account for all
subcommittee.
the finances there.
Okay.
That's correct.
And then when you said you doubled resident membership, what is it now? Do you know?
We have over 100.
100 resident members. Wow, okay. Do you know how much was raised at the Community Unity Dinner?
Yes.
Any
It was about $5,000.
Okay. And
Actually, community dinner doubled. We had double participation
that
versus
the
last year.
audience
It was
was
up
up, yeah,
93%. And we think we can almost double that next year, or going into this year, sorry.
I don't know where you're going to put any more people. I mean, it was pretty packed this year.
But it was
Yeah,
very
well,
successful. Yeah.
And the Small Business Saturday was the coupons you gave out? How many, do you know how many?
I gave out 130 bags.
Oh, 100, okay, great.
We promoted through press releases.
Yeah, I
and
saw
our
that.
social media, and I was very excited. This is our first time. And actually, it was nice to show the Rehoboth Main Street office, and they
Right.
stopped by, we had refreshments. They took their bag and went downtown to shop.
Right, sure, okay,
Yeah.
130, okay.
I think it would be helpful if you could also supply us with some financials, just sort of an idea of your income and your expenditures will give us a better feel for.
Sure, we can email. We just had our meeting, so.
I'm having a hard time wrapping my arms around, the income you have from other sources, plus what you want to spend things, programs, new programs you already have in place.
The city, the grants we get from the city is about 36% of our total income for the Main Street.
The 50,000 was?
Yes.
Okay.
And it was 38%, and what we're asking for would be 36%, as we're aggressively pursuing grants as well this year.
So
And
if I may
the
just
increase in
point-
membership, we have a lot of businesses that are joining for $1,000 memberships, so we're
Yeah,
anticipating to see
that all
that.
would be helpful,
Yeah.
to me anyway, is
that would be
understanding
very-
what
agreed.
percentage the businesses, what that revenue is for you and residents and, yeah. I think
We're
it's-
trying to decrease the amount we get from the city and expand it in other ways as well. So we went from 38 last year to 36 this year. And one of the things we also need, we need to get a new computer for Dan and some of the internal infrastructure. That's why we're asking for the additional 10,000 this year.
Do you mind if I just point out a couple things?
Sure.
So one of the things that I know from Main Street is a goal going into 2020 is additional marketing for use of the convention centers and working with the city. And obviously, it's going to be a little tricky in the calendar year 2021 with ClearSpace. But working with the hotels as well is marketing to groups and associations to bring people here in Rehoboth, whether they're using the convention center or banquet rooms. Main Street sees that as a big part of their role. As well as we have two very successful, knowledgeable grant writers that's now working with our organization. And as we're looking at things like streetscape beautification, there's a lot of overlap with the things we're looking at doing and goals that the city has. So we do see value that's going to come from having the resources that we have now with those grant writing experts. And it will help with things like beautification, streetscape, things that we've talked about as a city in general in the past. And thirdly, I think one of the things that we've done a good job at this past year and have only expanded on is our social media presence and getting the word out to the public about educational and informational things that, you know, that the city is trying to get out to residents and visitors, such as parking changes, you know, if we have a Jolly Trolley system, things like that. So I think those are just a couple key things to point out as well. But Dan, Walt, thank you.
A couple of comments. And Dan, Greer, and Walt, you know that I'm very supportive of Main Street, and I've been very involved in with the Rehoboth and Bloom in the first year, and I will continue to do that. And Rehoboth and Bloom has been very, very successful in a very short period of time of raising just about all of their own funds to cover all of their expenses, along with a great volunteer force. One of the questions that I frequently hear is, what's the difference between Main Street and the local Chamber of Commerce? And then kind of a next question is, how do you expand and make sure that you're coordinating, kind of bringing your strengths together for the good of our city businesses and residents, as opposed to tripping over each other and creating.
Or having redundancies.
Yeah, right.
I think it's, my goal as executive director is build that relationship with the Chamber of Commerce, you know, Carol Evanhart, and we've already met a few times to make sure we're on the same page as we're moving forward, you know, and, you know, their goal is to have memberships from Dewey, Route 1, all over the area. You know, our main focus, of course, is this downtown Rehoboth, the beautification, driving business downtown. From the bridge end is our area, 1 mile in and 1 mile across. So there is a difference, but all of us working together so our events don't coincide with each other. So I think it's important that we are building that relationship with the Chamber of Commerce.
Good to hear. Thank you.
I think in addition to with the Chamber of Commerce, I think one of the wonderful things that Dan has really focused us on and pulled a lot of things together is there's a group in Delmarva, all through Maryland, Virginia, and Delaware, of Main Streets that get together, and just being a part of that and seeing what they're doing and what things we can start to incorporate in Rehoboth, I think is a tremendous advantage for us. And one of the things that Dan has just gotten us involved with is we're going to be hosting that entire group right here in April for the meeting, and it's going to be done, and we're going to do it in coordination with the library. And so, and also with the museum. So Nancy Alexander is going to, we're going to utilize the whole second floor, but then also all these people can get to see more of what Rehoboth has to offer, and that's part of our outreach to all of these other organizations that, you know, we're a lot more than just come to the beach. We have so much more to offer in town.
I think it was important too, when I went to the meeting, we hadn't hosted an event since 2010. So they were really excited to hear. I said, yes, we definitely want to host the event. So it's different things like that we want to promote, you know, downtown.
I think you've done a super job since we brought you back to life, if you will, like 3 years ago. Just super job. You know, one of the principles I think that we talked about coming into this budget season were that we should look at investments that help to drive, you know, a positive economic impact for our city, and I think you've done that many times over. I would like to ask that we do get a pro forma statement. You know, it just shows kind of where we are. I just want to reiterate that. That's probably the specific thing, and highlight, you know, where that you know, additional funding would go. I think we've gotten a super return on investment. I just think if you show it to us, you might have a better shot at convincing everyone, you know, to make an additional investment. So that's my 2 cents on it. But great job overall. The events you're bringing back into town, the coordination, the emphasis on historical preservation, all those things, just really super job, guys. Thanks.
Thank you.
And you're all, most of you are volunteers. I know you have full-time jobs, so again, thanks.
And I don't want to repeat all the good and well-earned statements that people made up here, but it would be personally helpful to kind of see a little bit more detail in the finances and where the money that we contribute to your great causes goes. So, but I think you've done a great job of really accelerating the impact that Main Street's had on the city of Rehoboth Beach. So thank you all for that, and all the people who work with you.
Thank you. We appreciate the support. And yes, we are all volunteers. I started with the startup. I was asked to come on as treasurer. And I tell you, I'm a full-time resident, I live downtown. I frequent the businesses and the restaurants maybe a little too much, which I got to work on. But it's the passion in the community, a sense of community between the residents, the businesses, the city, and it's a wonderful thing to see. And that's why we all volunteer our time. And if you look at each board member, the wealth of knowledge that they bring and the commitment behind the scenes that a lot of people don't see is because they love the city and care about the city, the residents, the businesses, and our visitors as well. So we have a great city. Thank you.
Great job.
Dan or Walt, can you email that to Ms. Womack
Yeah.
so she can forward it to the commissioners and it's part of the.
Give me a few
public
minutes.
record
I'll
as well?
email our year end. We just had our board meeting the other day, so you can see our year end where we ended up.
Yeah,
in 2000 and the budget
for 20.
and the approved budget that we approved. Yep.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So in the interest of time, we also have Matt Janis, who's here. I just wanted him to just spend a couple of minutes talking to you about the transition that we spoke of last time, what our intention is this coming year for the Building and Licensing Department.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Just like to make a really quick statement I think we can all get on board with, and that's thank the gods that it's Friday. So I'm here to entertain any questions you may have considering building and licensing and in me in general.
Do we have in the budget that, I think I saw it in the last time, but some funding for a project to revamp the zoning code?
Yes.
Is that
Yes,
still in
ma'am.
there?
There's $10,000 in there.
Oh, there is? Oh, okay, I actually didn't.
Yeah, I kind of was looking as well.
It's in the operating budget.
Okay, all right, 10,000.
Okay.
Is that sufficient?
So that's to start it off. KCI is working with us to start off some preliminary research, at least this year, as to what we have.
So is KCI going to be the organization that does the
Yes.
rewrite?
Yes. They have consultants on board that are going to assist us with this.
Okay.
They've done it for a number of different.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Sussex County, 15 or so, 15 or 20.
Yes.
Right.
So is this a good time to ask then what's kind of the timeline that you envision for this? The 10K will go to kind of kicking this off, doing initial research. Do you have a longer-term plan? You must, and a longer-term budget?
Yes, and so the initial start for this is to, obviously, there's a lot of work that needs to be done with this, but let me just, give me 1 second here. But the initial thrust will be to have Matt and Dennis and Dom, when he returns, and they've already started to compile a list of issues. So what are the main issues that need to be brought to the commissioner's attention so they could look at possibly revamping the ordinances?
Say they already have a list, or they're already?
The building and licensing has started a list.
Yeah, we have an ongoing list. Pretty much the main participants of building and licensing have an ongoing list that we recognize as problematic.
When do you expect we would see that?
With the approval of the budget, we can really start digging into that kind of stuff. That was one of the requirements for Debbie when she comes in to start doing that work, is have a good formal list of all the areas.
And I would think through the CDP process, they're going to come up with a number of different things too. From the surveys, they've got a number of different ideas, but it sounds like they're talking about the same type of stuff. It's not going to happen overnight, obviously.
Right.
But it's something that I think the addition of the two will be very,
Yeah, and that's what I wondered about with timing, because the CDP is not going to be finished well, I guess it might be finished within this next budget year, but then the zoning rewrite would come after that, or there's some idea that some of the zoning rewrite would be done before that?
probably after.
I would
There-
think.
It's a long
I would
term.
think.
Actually, in tandem with that, so, and what they're projecting is looking at frequent Board of Appeals applications, outdated definitions and new trends. And then the first year would also include research and solutions for the immediate MATS list and other staff lists, as well as scoping with the comp plan to get that kind of in line with each other. So as you
It's
know.
background work,
Yeah, so as you know, the KCI
Yep.
is, Debbie File is, involved with the comprehensive development plan. And that's, I think, part of the reason why the cost is so low, because this is a kickoff.
I just think it's so critical. And as we continue to find ourselves in situations with issues going before the Board of Adjustments, and then the potential of lawsuits, I don't want to, I think it's so important, I don't want to underfund the process. So that's my only concern. That's why I asked if it was enough.
So,
Excuse me. No. This is the commissioner's budget discussion, and we're having our discussion. Go ahead.
so Sharon, I certainly agree with Edward, how critical this is. So, do you have a sense of the bigger picture of what the total cost might be for this and what the timeline is?
So typically, this, zoning revamp, if you will, takes minimum of 3 years. I think in future, this will be a good start, and for the next 21 budget, 21-22 budget, we'll see a greater cost because there'll be more defined goals set out from this. This is, I call it the process that we're going to get organized to see what we are. We're kind of jumbled around right now. We have a little this and a little that. We know that there are issues, and it's going to take time.
So do you have a sense of the cost? I mean, is it 50,000 a year, 100,000 a year for 2 or 3 years after this year?
So the current 10,000 for this year, I think, probably would be at least 25 to 50 in the next year, and then the same in the following year.
All go into operating costs
Yes.
for all of that. Okay.
I just have a couple of comments as you're kind of moving more into a leadership role. A couple things I've observed and gotten feedback on even yesterday at the coffee shop. So one is it seems like and I appreciate the info I asked Sharon this offline, but the legal fees for building and licensing have more than doubled over the past couple years. And the comments I'm making and the comments I receive I never receive comments from the public. I don't, it's Matt or it's Dom or whoever. It's process oriented questions. And comments and criticism. So I want to be clear on that. But so number one, I do wonder what's causing all the. I think I know, but what's your take, number one, on the more than doubling of our legal expenses and building licensing? And number two, and probably this has been one of my things, everybody has their thing, one of my things has been just really looking at the process, not the code and the issues with the code, but the process in building and licensing. And let me tell you an example of that. Last year I heard from several new businesses, it took six to 8 weeks to get a sign approved that needed no variance, that needed no anything. You know, there's been several cases this year that have been public where, you know, we've interpreted code one way and then, you know, a home builder has invested in, you know, in a design that based on that approval, and then we're told later that they didn't meet the, so I'm wondering if there's, I don't know whether it'll take an investment, whether you can work with University of Delaware grad students, somebody to do a process improvement review. You know, how can we maybe cut signs down to a week, you know, if there's no variance needed, so that you can spend the time on the real hard, meaty issues that I absolutely know you're dealing with every single day for many reasons. So I would just encourage you, work with Sharon, but somehow look at the process. Is there a way to improve the process? You know, where we're spending a little bit of time on these, you know, relatively maybe simpler things, getting them off our plate, spending more time or having more meetings ahead of time so that we're not in litigation. And I don't know, maybe it is all about the zoning code needing to be revamped. But I just ask you to look at the process, and if there's funding required for that, let us know, you know. Or is there a creative thing we can do to have a master's program come in and, you know, for their thesis and help us with this. So that's just my feedback to you.
Sure.
Some of the legal, the legal expenses, some of that is due to the commissioners and what you bring forward as far as ordinances, and then we need to then go back with the city attorney and make sure that we're on board with how we need to implement and enforce. That's some of it, a small part of it. I'll say, you know, there's a lot of inconsistencies, as we've talked about in the code, and Matt and Dom and even Dennis now spend a great deal of time making sure that going before the Board of Adjustment or the Planning Commission, they have it as they're knowledgeable about it and they have it down right, because that's their job to do that. Ongoing expenses are incurred based on some of the inconsistencies, but also some of the, you know, legalities, I'll say, that are very, very confusing. And building and licensing staff are not attorneys, so we need the city solicitor and mainly, and sometimes other legal opinions to get them through. So they have meetings on a regular basis. That's not new. To address the, you know, I don't know what the process piece of it. I think that there is a good process. We've revamped that a lot. Dom and Matt have met with some of the contractors this past year, and we now have a list. You know, some contractors just don't want to adhere to the process, and they try to skirt around that. I'll be quite frank. They spend, Matt and Building and Licensing spend a great deal of time, you know, tracking these folks down and trying to get them to adhere to our process. So I hear what you're saying, but I'm also, you know, advising if anybody wants to come in and talk to us about the process or have a recommendation themselves, we'd be happy to hear that.
Certainly.
Matt, do you want to add anything
Yeah,
to
I would
that?
just like to add, as far as the legal fees goes, keep in mind that we did tackle 2 hotbed issues this year with the stormwater and the adoption of the 2018 the codes. So we did have some legal issues going back and forth with that, making sure we were, you know, in the right by doing so, and we were doing it correctly. And as far as the process,
I just think that's why it's so important to a couple of my colleagues' comments that if a lot of the issues, you know, that are driving the increased legal costs are due to the inconsistencies in the code, that even puts a finer point on investing the right amount into it.
Right. Yeah.
And just coming into this, I believe it is, you know, one of the factors for the process is definitely tightening up the zoning code, getting a lot of the inconsistencies cleared up in that. And to speak towards the time length and the, I guess, the progress of that, we do have a couple I want to call them maybe hotbed or feel-good issues that we could certainly enact almost immediately to give the public a little bit of happiness that, you know, we're looking at this stuff and we're moving forward and we are intent in dressing up this zoning code and getting some clarification for the issues.
When would you plan to bring those forward? I guess we're talking about one this afternoon, but I mean, are you thinking of other things? when you-
Sure. So we're kind of waiting on the budget to be approved for this, so we can get the agency involved. We can begin to do that stuff. So we're just waiting for budget approval.
You know, one thing, speaking not only of the fees, but just, and of the process, is I really, you know, I don't have a clear sense of how our fee structure compares to other communities, but I do know that I think that the costs of everything you all do, whether it's the legal fees or your expenses and everything, should be borne by people that are building and not by our taxpayers. So I think we should look at the fee structure and make sure that we're covering all those costs. And again, I don't know how our fees compare to other communities, so I don't know if that would put us, you know, high or where we stack there. But I do feel like we should look at that, and, you know, perhaps we aren't charging enough for the people who are actually coming in and demanding these services and causing these fees, legal fees, to go up, you know.
You're correct, and we'll be looking at that and making recommendations for that. That's part of this process.
That's great.
Correct.
Matt, can you just spend very brief time, because you are transitioning into the chief building official, explaining to the commissioners some of the training that you've had over the course of your time here?
Certainly. So the first year I got here, keep in mind, I'm just started my third year, so yay me. So my very first year here, I got the following certifications: building inspector, building plans examiner, which is overall for both commercial and residential, commercial building inspector, and residential building inspector. This year, I have on schedule in March plumbing, a course in overall commercial and residential plumbing inspector. I expect to test for that in March as well. I have some accessibility reviewing coming up in May, and I expect to test for that shortly thereafter the program. And I have a FEMA course coming up in September for residential design in flood-prone areas. For my career goals, I look to become a ICC certified fire marshal. I look to become a ICC certified building official. And contrary to a very inaccurate and dangerous report that was put out recently, I wholeheartedly believe in sprinkler systems, and I look to become an inspector of building suppression, fire suppression systems as well.
Great, thank you.
Thank
you. Sharon, just a quick question on the reports that provided, because I'm looking at some of the things that we're talking about. In the binder, the 2019 actual is actually the 2020 fiscal year, correct? And the 20 prelim is the 2021 actual or budgeted amount?
The 2020 preliminary is actually the fiscal year 2021.
Right, okay.
What's happened in Munis, we've got...
I understand. I just want to make sure that I was reading it correctly.
Yeah.
Okay.
The far right column is what we're talking about.
It's the budget.
Is the budget.
Thank you, Matt.
Thanks, Matt.
Thanks, Matt.
Thanks, Matt.
Okay. So we covered a lot in the couple hours that we've been together. As far as proceeding into the next meeting in February, do you have any recommendations for
Well,
that?
I mean, I think there's a couple things before we go into specifics. One is just going down the lines here, that the libraries asked for $15,000 more, and Main Street's asked for $15,000 more. So that's something to think about. 10,000. Also, that in the most recent updated budget, we are showing the sale of 84 Kent. And I know there's still some legal issues and whatnot, but that's something that we need to discuss before we probably leave today. And then the rest is, I would think, if we can briefly talk about things that we feel are left out or should be placed in the budget, just so that Sharon and her staff have the opportunity that between now and the next budget meeting in February, the first week of February, I think that's the 10th, that we give her the opportunity to go over the things that we're thinking about. So I'll open that up to anybody's thoughts.
You know, in terms of the property, you all discussed the property sale of Kent last year, right? And had
Yeah,
some meeting.
It came up last year, we talked about it, and it just kind of sat there.
Right.
Now, we talked about it the last budget meeting, and
Right.
the solicitor's been brought in what?
Yeah, and it's great to see the prospect of 800,000 added to the budget, you know, relatively easily. But I have to tell you, I have very mixed feelings about this because I recognize that this is not a property we're making anything on right now. Nevertheless, it's an asset. And, you know, we get that 800,000, but we get it exactly once. So, you know, if we need ongoing funds, it's not going to help with that. So it seems almost like a desperation to make this year's budget work when we may have just as many priorities next year. I mean, I'm not saying we shouldn't do it. I think I'm glad it's there. I'm struggling with where to put it in the mix because of these factors. I mean, the land value will increase. You may have something a few years from now that's where you need more than 800 and it would be worth more than 800. So it's a done, you know, it's a one and done kind of thing, and we don't have that elsewhere here. So, you know, I just, you know, if we really need it, then we really need it.
I think that something that would be helpful on that point of, you know, potentially considering the sale of a real estate asset is being provided a list of all of the
Well,
city's
yes,
real
I was
estate
going to
assets.
ask about
We
that.
have a
Yeah,
list.
actually.
We do have a list. It's been submitted to us in the
has it?
past.
Okay, yeah.
So there is one. Probably the two of you have not seen it.
Yeah, you might have talked about that last year.
Yeah.
Right, exactly. But
So,
no, I didn't
you
see
know,
it.
from my perspective, I've been a big driver behind this one, is this property has not been used for many, many years. And I don't foresee it being used for anything in particular moving forward. So if we're in, you know, your thoughts of maybe counting on it increasing in value over time, you know,
And it may not. It may fall in value over time.
Right,
depending on
right,
If there's a
and
recession. So I know.
So, I mean, I fully support moving forward with this sale, just to be upfront, and I think people know that. We're not doing anything with it, and I think it just would be best to go ahead and sell it.
I agree.
Yeah, I also agree, Pat. It's a building that clearly is deteriorating, and once that deterioration starts, I think it'll go faster. It's become an eyesore where it is. It's not adding anything to.
No.
I'm
to our
not
community.
against selling it at all. I mean, I almost wish it's the kind of thing that we weren't talking about during budget season. Because then it could be, the decision could be made on the basis of whether or not it's worth keeping that asset rather than, do we need funds this year?
Well,
Because we're not going to get them again. We're only going to get them once.
Sorry, I didn't mean to.
No, it's
I
fine.
just,
No,
I just wanted,
yeah.
I mean, just some background. We did talk about this quite
Yeah.
a bit, and I know that we're getting new input, and I think that's super, new thinking around it, but we did go through all those questions, I think, last year.
Right.
And really came to the conclusion that we wanted to do this, and I think it's just coming up again in budget season because this came off budget last year. We wanted to deal with this during the year. I think we just, you know, didn't get the final data till recently that happens to coincide with the budget. So it's not really a budget driving thing. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think it was about the budget. I think it was more about,
No, it
let's
wasn't
look at
about
our
the budget at
assets.
all. No.
Yeah,
it
and
just-
see, does that make sense?
It does,
And
yes.
certainly new input's super, but I just wanted to tell you it
Right,
wasn't
right.
about,
Okay.
the original discussion wasn't about budget
Right.
so much. It was about, do we really need this asset on
It
our
would be good to see a
inventory?
list of
Yeah.
of
There might be more.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you have that you can send out again.
But I mean, I
don't
think it's
you?
great. It's a nice sort of windfall to have. I just, you know, once.
I don't know how we want to proceed specifically. I mean, there are a couple of things that I wanted to see funded this year that aren't on this list. And I don't like to be Debbie Downer on some of these things, but, so, you know, I love the idea of the tot lot. But I'm trying to, in my own mind, for example, because to me, I really think the Jolly Trolley circulator bus for town is really important. So I look at maybe the $108,000 that the city could invest, and also will be doing profit sharing in the future if it's a success, that's an investment that will give us payback. Now, granted, you know, these things that we provide for tourists and residents is also important. But let's not, in my mind, ignore that we have 3 tot lots in the city. And I just feel that if we're saying a tot lot that is specifically for children, and as opposed to doing something with the Jolly Trolley, $250,000 for the tot lot, $108,000 for the Jolly Trolley. We've got some other tot lots in the town. Somehow I'm having a hard time with that. I don't know how everybody else feels about this, but for me, I feel like if that's going to keep us from moving forward with something with Jolly Trolley, it makes me unhappy.
You know, I thought the Jolly Trolley proposal last year was really interesting. I was here both times they presented, and then what was said at the February budget meeting, which is where they came back and presented, was that they would speak to the Streets and Transportation Committee, they would speak to the Parking Committee, they would speak to homeowners. And I don't know, I think they did speak to Streets and Transportation, but beyond that, no planning really occurred between that point and they've come back. And to me, the devil is in the details on that one big time. And I don't frankly think our homeowners even know about it. Certainly the people whose addresses are on the map were a little alarmed. And so I think it needs a plan that may not be able to be implemented this soon and therefore, you know, wouldn't necessarily be in the budget. But I have to also say I'm disappointed that trolley is not ADA accessible, and the tot lot would be. So, I mean, that's a big gap in our goal of accessibility, I think. And also in other towns, the trolleys are electric, and this wouldn't be. So there are a lot of variables of that make the trolley, I think, a good idea that needs to be fleshed out more.
Well, personally, for me, the Jolly Trolley, I think, has been flushed out for years. I think this is something that we've been talking about as a city for years, having some kind of a people mover within the town. And I think, you know, an investment of $100,000 plus per year, and it's not just for this year. I mean, I would assume that we'd have to put $100,000 in each year for the next 5, just to be on the safe side. And if we can get money out of it, that's fine. But I think it's a very necessary thing. They put on the table a year or so ago a map of the city, the same one that they put on now. Now they've just put in preliminary type stops. This is something that, yes, I think we do need to get more information out to people, and I think that will be the case if we can get this in the budget for this year, so that between now and the spring, we could have 1 or 2 town hall meetings to discuss the possibilities. And I think that's what the Jolly Trolley people suggested. But I think this is something that, rather than put it off to the future, it is something that, you know, they're going to put up 2 buses. Conceivably, if this thing is very successful, 2, 3, 4 years down the road, we don't have to put anything in. If this thing is very successful, maybe within those 2 or 3, 4 years, we could get some funding from the state, from the county, that from a grant perspective, that makes it worth our while. But as I said in the last meeting, it's something that we have to put up money up front and hope to get it. It's just like some of the other things. It's just like the tot lot. It's It's gonna cost $250,000 to have what's in that picture, but hopefully, we might be able to reach out and get as much as 50% back. But I think they wanna see that you're gonna spend it, there's all this support in the community, and then we'll help you. But it's very difficult for these organizations to say, oh, it sounds like a great idea, here it is, without having commitment from the community. But I think the Jolly Trolley is a need. I'm not necessarily sure about taking it from the tot lot, but that's something to think about. You know, it's finding some revenues for this stuff, but I think the Jolly Trolley is a very important part of our future.
You know, on their website, they seem to be very proud of the fact that they've had this service from between Dewey and Rehoboth for 28 years with no public funds. So how have they been able to do that, but they can't do this? I mean, that's the biggest question that people have asked of me. In fact, I didn't find that wording on the website. A resident did, and that's the biggest question people are asking. I don't know if you have do you have any sense from that survey that was put out there, what people are saying about it? Because I guess we got a lot of responses in comparative to other surveys anyway. And I know it's been talked about. It was in the CDP in 2010. I realize that, but the devil's in the details. And and I will say that in other cities, trolleys are free, actually. Bethany's is 25 cents, but in many other places, they're free.
And you know where the money comes from?
I was going to... No.
Taxpayers.
Huh?
Taxpayers. So my thought along
It doesn't
those
all...
lines-
But, okay, go ahead.
Where it comes from in communities, it comes from taxpayers.
But there's a dedicated revenue source for it.
So my thought here is, let's pull out $100,000
Okay.
of parking.
Yeah, okay, well,
Put right
that's...
to this.
Yeah. Parking permits, though, because the...
Permits or the meters, whatever the bulk of that money is. Because, you know, the thing is, if we look at the amount of money that our city takes in from parking,
Yeah.
you know, why aren't people saying, wow, why isn't that $6 million we took in last year just going into parking technology this year? Because
We have
it
a lot of other
funds our
things,
budget.
funds a lot of other things.
And so I have no issue whatsoever. If we have things like a Jolly Trolley that's going to solve some problems, some issues from parking, we dedicate $100,000 a year for the next 5 years out of our parking to that.
And it's supposed to encourage people to park in the permitted areas and not in the downtown metered areas, and I know you talked at the last meeting about the problem with raising the permit fees because then it would be out of balance or out of sync with the meter fee. I know you talked about that, but at the same time, you know, maybe we could look at what a surcharge, I mean, that's what other towns do. They have a specific surcharge, whether it's on a hotel tax and they have a lot higher rates than we have. They have a lot different funding sources. They have sales taxes. They have a lot of funding sources. But they may earmark a specific percentage in something to fund the trolley. And I'm just saying, if we think it's tied to permit parking, then maybe we raise permit parking or have a surcharge on permit parking.
Or we just put it on permit parking as it is now.
Well, right now, that money's all going to other things.
But where is permit parking going to? It costs a few dollars to do permits or the administration, but it's going into the general budget. So we pull out $100,000 a year from permits and dedicate it to the Jolly Trolley.
And then that's $100,000 that won't go to stormwater or to other infrastructure.
That's true. And who pays for stormwater in most municipalities? Residents. So we can set up a stormwater fee.
There's talk of doing that. Yeah.
But I mean, you know, we're talking about long time versus short time.
Right, yeah. And in the short term, I'd just like to see it, as I said, fleshed, because I don't think it's been fleshed. It's been talked about for a long time. I don't think it's been fleshed out because I want to see it succeed. And, you know, another example that was given is the traffic backs way up on Henlopen in the summer such that it can take 15 minutes just to go 2 blocks because of the traffic leaving town. So I would hate for the Jolly Trolley to come in and do a route that doesn't work and doesn't succeed, and then we don't have it, you know.
And then we don't fund it anymore.
Well, but that would be that would be unfortunate. I mean, I think the goal would be to have it be successful from the start.
So we try to make it work.
Right.
But the best way to make it work is to start somewhere.
And I also believe that. I mean, I don't know how many more studies you want to do before you can implement something like this. Frankly, we've been talking about this for a long, long time.
Right.
And I think the time has come for us to do it. And I know that you're saying, in fact, I know that, I don't know if you listened to the presentation before, but Lydia
several
has
times.
spent a lot of time going through that whole, the whole
Right.
trail, if you will, around town, and has measured the head time and head, whatever they call it, the time that it takes. So, I mean, it's not like they've not been doing anything, maybe not enough for you, or you want to find something different from them, but I think the more we wait on this, I think it just doesn't make sense to me, especially when we want to spend $250,000 on a tot lot when we have 2 other tot lots. It just, to me, it doesn't make sense not to go forward.
Well, and I think in many cases, we have to look at where we invest money, what's going to get the biggest impact. And I don't have any children myself, but I love kids. I walk the path around Lake Aurora, and I love it when there are families in there playing. I think that has to definitely be a long-term plan, short-term plan, to make that an attractive place for children to be able to play and families to be able to go to. But I do support the Jolly Trolley service. One of the things that the Hastings family mentioned when they presented this last time was communication is key. And so I believe if we show the commitment of the city to have that type of service, which can benefit a lot of people, then we have town halls or whatever it is to refine the solution between now and when it's put in service, and make those adjustments that we have to make. And I think that will help prepare us for success.
I certainly agree, Steve, with that. Several things that have been mentioned are important to me about Jolly Trolley. We received a very articulate letter from Mr. Cook this week. I think most of us received it. And I think that's, he brings up a number of things. One that resonated with me a bit is a concern about where the stops are, and have we really taken a good look at, are the proposed stops in the absolute best places? Well, we certainly won't know the total answer to that until we try some things, and those can be adjusted as time goes on if they become problematic. But I think Mr. Cook raised some good issues. 2 other things that I think are really critical, and as I watched the video from the meeting with a couple of weeks ago when I wasn't here, it was a little vague to me, and Susan just brought it up. The Hastings family interest in the trolleys being accessible for the disabled. I think that is important, and we need to return to that discussion and see what the options are. It is important. And I think also looking at trolleys that have alternative energy sources, whether it be electric or some alternative that's non-petroleum based product. I think these are opportunities for us to model some things in the community that we give a lot of lip service to, but it's a time to do this and to try to do it well. Hopefully these are things that would come out in a town hall meeting as well.
In some ways, I think if we look, it's more baby steps from my perspective. Yeah, I would love to have an electric trolley. That would be great. But right now, we want to make sure that it's going to be a successful service. So to ask to, make investments in those types of things the first year, I'm not sure makes entire sense. I'd like to say I know it's going to be successful, but I don't know that. But I think it probably will. And so that's kind of where, from my perspective, if they go with just a regular gasoline vehicle, I'd be okay with that. But if it's successful, say we want to move to electric vehicles in town. So that's my thinking.
The Jolly Charlie subject, I think it has raised more questions that I have now than anything. So I'd like to see Lydia come back to answer some of these questions at her next meeting.
I mean, even before a town hall?
Even before town hall. I think
Like,
some of this
what
stuff
kind
needs
of
to get.
questions do you have? Just curious. Because we've had her back several times, and I'm just wondering what kind of questions you have.
When she did, the half-hour route, when did they do that half-hour route? How many times did they test that route? When she said the trolleys could be ADA accessible, a little more detail about that. How are they purchasing these trolleys? Are they leasing them? If we want them to upgrade to electric in a couple years, are there options for that while maintaining the character of the trolley? Those are just a few.
Okay.
And I'd add to that, kind of show us the actual financial pro forma
oh,
of this.
yes,
I mean,
I think we need
got
that.
some anecdotal type numbers, but what is the return?
And I'll be very honest too. I know the mayor feels comfortable with us spending $100,000 for the next 5 years, but I do not. If this isn't self-sufficient in a year or two, with getting grants, advertising, support from the business community, I think that's too much of an investment over the long haul.
Yeah, and in the last meeting, we did ask her to look at potential grants, to talk with the business community, and come back with other investment sources.
And I
so
know
it's not all
Main
from the
Street
city,
and the
so-
Chamber and a few other of us are going to meet with them
yeah.
and
good.
set that up.
Great.
But still,
important,
just,
yeah.
I mean, that's kind of
Yeah, and-
thinking more than just
I mean, I'd
this.
love to
We'd like
see-
to hear
next
the
year.
results.
Yeah, I'd love to see a
Follow that,
business
yeah.
plan, because I don't know why, I was expecting at the end of the presentation last time for her to have something, and all we heard was that it was 106,000, we didn't really know. And so I didn't realize that there would probably be a 5-year plan with this, and I want to know what we get for that, whether we're buying the trolleys and we'll own them at that point, or whether this is just a fee for service. Or what. So, and the other thing was interesting, because I asked the question when she presented of how many riders do they have in the summer on the original route, and she said, what did she say, 100,000 a day or something? 1,000 a day, so 100,000 for the summer. But that can't just be from that trolley. I mean, they just have 2 an hour, right? Yeah, but two separate trolleys
No, I
every.
think they have more vehicles than that.
I thought they were every 30 minutes, just like these. Okay, well, anyway, I was wondering if that meant, because that means that they're earning, if they're charging $1, then what do they need? They've got their $1,000 a day, So I just, it's hard to imagine, and I just didn't get a sense of what their projection would be for riders here, that's all.
So can we move to another subject
Anyway,
then?
yeah, lots of questions.
So, yeah, exactly. So I think that's a great next steps to have her come back. I'll go back to what I started with today, and it's process, a bit of process, but specific questions on it. First of all, just to clarify, what is the park and ride subsidy that you're recommending be eliminated?
So the city's been maintaining that program since the existence of it, the park and ride, and we've talked to the representatives from DART, and they're willing to take it over. So that
Oh, okay.
20,000 would be eliminated.
That's great.
If I can just go into that specific, as I mentioned, I think in the last meeting, the park and ride used to be $10 to park. It's now going to be free. So now the park and ride offers discounted passes to employees, so that it's actually the subsidy wouldn't even be taking place with the new things that are done by DART.
That's great. And my other, the process thing that really kind of got my hackles up at the beginning, when I looked at, the charts from last meeting, and when I say charts, I mean the capital improvement plan, right? So, you look at like convention center chairs, we haven't even had a briefing on those. Nothing's officially happened. We haven't talked to the public on anything. We're getting a briefing this afternoon. But yet, the spreadsheet dated January 3rd cites convention center chairs as essential. The spreadsheet dated 1/15 cites them as deferrable. In the spreadsheet dated January 3rd, the the Delaware Avenue restroom expansion's deferrable. And then all of a sudden, some miracle occurred, and on January 15th, it's urgent. And that happens across the board with things, and I have no idea why and how some of these things
Because I think
went from
that we,
deferrable to urgent.
well, I think it's because we discussed it and decided that, yes, we want recycling on the boardwalk. Yes, we want to have the restrooms upgraded for family restrooms. I mean,
I don't remember coming to consensus on that, but nonetheless, all of a sudden, so it's interesting to me. And then, things that we did have some, but we didn't say we didn't want convention center chairs or audio, and all of a sudden that got changed. So there was some consensus that we did want to look at investing, and we're having a briefing this afternoon on it. We had a general consensus here to put in the project for the Kent and Sussex Street, and it's not in here. So those are a couple things that, that like kind of strike me that you didn't put them back in here. We asked you to look at some of the expenses. There's operational expenses and make some tougher calls on those, and there isn't any. But the specific things that I think, I don't think we said we wanted to spend $640,000 on the restroom. So I think in the next iteration, we'd like to see a cut in scope on that. I'm not sure we all agreed on, the tot lot investment, and yet that moved from, able to be deferred to urgent. So I think I heard up here the consensus was that we cut the scope on that somehow. I think, and I'll just give a couple more, and I'm just making assumptions, happy to have those disputed. The convention center, when I look at, you'll hear in the briefing this afternoon, but that convention center has a $1.5 million, economic impact on our city, and there's opportunity for more if we do some things right there. So we are continuing to talk about that, so I'm not sure why the status changed. And then the project on Sussex and Fourth, there was a consensus that we wanted to see that funded. And then also Lake Gerard. I mean, we've had 2 years we've talked about funding that, and it's still in the deferred category. So those are the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 specific things that really caught my attention here.
And can you, I'm writing this down, so the fourth.
Say them again?
The fourth and
We want to cut the scope of the restroom project, I think, at least
Oh,
to
it was line
consider.
33 in the
It's
budget.
changed, so yeah.
Oh, has it- have the
From
line
one
numbers
chart to the
changed on the
next.
new
Yeah,
one?
so I didn't
Okay.
cite numbers. The one that we talked about earlier, I think we wanted to loop back on it, not ask Edward to jump in, but this is just where I am. We wanted to cut the scope of that project. We wanted to, I think I heard that we like having the tot lot. We think we'd like to have things more inclusive, but maybe we cut the scope of that and rely more on grants or other investments areas. The convention center. I'm not sure we're there yet that we want to not invest in the chairs and the AV. We haven't really even talked about it. So I'd like to see some money there. The Sussex 4th Street stormwater issues, that 200, and I think it's 220K. I'm going to see that back in the budget. And the Lake Gerard, the dredging, et cetera.
Okay.
We've talked about that many times.
If I can address
Yeah,
them.
sure. Yeah.
Because I just need some clarification and general guidance from all of the commissioners.
Sure.
Cut the scope in the restroom construction. Is everyone in agreement with that?
Good question.
Do you want us to do that?
I think what I heard was getting rid of the changing rooms, go with 4 family restrooms. So potentially that could make the footprint smaller, or they could, no, I'm not sure, but that's kind of how I'm envisioning it. If they could make the footprint smaller of this building, presumably it might be cheaper, and we're looking at four.
But it's additional fixtures, so it's,
Additional
it has
plumbing
the
and
potential
fixtures.
to go up a little, but actually,
Yeah, I
unless-
don't know, but I mean,
Yeah,
if,
So we'll get a cost for
Okay.
not having the changing rooms in
yeah,
there.
yeah,
Is that right?
that's, yes, I think that's where we left it.
Family
Four family.
for family restrooms.
Or maybe you give us options, if we go with 2 rooms, or 4 rooms, you know, or something that
Option
gets the
two-
cost.
2 with
i-
plumbing
If,
and
yeah,
4 with plumbing.
right,
Well,
Do we have a number we're trying to get to?
$1. I don't know, half of that. I
Porta
just
pot out
can't,
there.
with all the other investments in infrastructure, which the 200K you propose, personally, I'm like, of course, like, we have to do that. Maybe we need more in stormwater if we're gonna run into the same problems in Row, but, so Dash, look at that, you know, that's where I think we should make the investments. But, I mean, I'd like to see it cut in half so that we can make the investment in
Okay,
stormwater.
so I also heard that we should just move forward with the design, and then, so that would be considerably less, and then bring that back in next year's.
No, I didn't hear that. We
Well,
We did talk about that.
we
to be
talked about
fair.
it, but
To
I
be
didn't hear a
fair.
consensus on
but
that
I
one.
think we have to have family restrooms by next
Yeah,
year.
yeah, right.
So we'll look at cutting that in half.
Either 2 or 4.
Right.
And
Right.
Yeah, I agree
There
that
are
that's the,
options to get prices on.
yeah, that's the way
Okay.
to go there.
And the tot lot, so in order, as you heard Liz say, in order to apply for the most from the ORPT grant, there needs to be a commitment in the budget for the tot lot.
For the
So-
entire thing? The
Yes.
Entire, okay.
Oh, for the entire thing, I missed
Yes.
that.
Yeah, that's huge, yeah. So meaning, if there was 125 in there, what would they say? They would say,
Well,
go away, or?
No, that's, no, but what I heard Liz say is 125,000 will considerably change the scope and what we're able to provide as far as accessibility and the
Right.
equipment.
But if she got grant money, it would,
But
Go back.
but typically, with those situations, you
Matching?
typically put in, it's a matching
okay,
situation.
okay.
They're not gonna say, oh, you're putting in 125, well, then we'll put it in. They're looking at it from the perspective, oh, you're willing to put in 250? Well, I tell you what, we'll do 50% of that. It's a matching situation,
okay,
but starting from zero, kind of. And
so if
that's
we,
how they look at it.
so we could do 150 and they might then get it up to 225?
If we put 150 in our
math's saying.
budget, they'll say, we'll give you as much as 75.
Right,
Okay, there you go, that's a 225, done.
done.
Evan, can you maybe just talk about the process a little bit more on getting grant and how we may get that money after the fact? So we do have to put up the costs up front? Is that accurate?
Sure, so typically, at least how the ORPT grant works, and we currently have an ORPT grant right now. The ORPT grant that we have right now is for the canal access dock. We were awarded $90,000 for that project, and so far to date, we've spent about half of those funds. So what I have to do is just about every month I submit for reimbursements through ORPT, which requires me to get invoices from the contractor and submit those invoices with a proof that the city's paid the contractor in full for that invoice amount. I submit that in every month and I'll get reimbursed half of the expenses. Some of the projects, expenses are not eligible, such as administration. It has to go towards specific work that's done. So typically that's what it works. That's how it works. I mean, the city regardless has to pay for everything up front. And then once we prove that we have been invoiced and we've paid that invoice, then we could submit for 50%
Do we
reimbursement.
always, I guess a simple question is, do we always get a commitment of grants before the project starts? Or do we sometimes get the grant approval after we're already in the process
I think it's
of
both.
construction?
Occasionally, we will go into a grant application with hopes that we will be awarded the grant and complete the project. In some cases, the project's already started, we hear about the grant and we submit for it, and it ends up just becoming additional revenue for that project.
I just don't think we can say, okay, we're gonna commit 175 and hope we get another 75 to, when we're already gonna start beginning the scope of the work.
Well, then you decrease the size. I mean, they're expanding the, and I get some of it's because of the handicapped access. I get it. But do we need 6 or 5 or 4, or however, do we need all those apparatus in there? Or do we, build a nice solid Toyota as opposed to a, what's a fancy car? I don't know.
Cadillac.
A Cadillac or Lexus. I mean, do we need a Lexus or do we do a, really nice, Toyota Camry? I don't know. I mean, that's what I'm saying. Let's do a Camry.
Yeah.
If we can't get the grants to match. I mean, so I'd ask you to look at the scope of that project.
Yeah.
So should we ask for an estimate of what would a tot lot look like at 150,000?
That's a great question.
Yeah, we could do that.
That is
That's
the
a good
question.
question.
Good
And
question.
it may be very adequate
Good question.
for our community needs.
Well
It may not, but how do we know? We're at the stage at this point in January, being able to explore these things.
Right.
and
No, I like that
As much
approach.
data
Great
as we can
question.
in the coming weeks.
Okay.
Go ahead. You're still
The
going
convention center chairs. I could be totally wrong on this. So Commissioner Schlosser and I had an exchange. We brought 2 chairs in and actually brought them to the meeting the other day. But prior to that, you had sent me a picture of maybe what I missed on cushier chairs,
Yeah.
stadium seating, or church seating, or,
Yeah.
and and then the comment was, it was vague again. It was like maybe not. And then I think what I took out of that was, because the 2 chairs that we brought in were not what you were and the committee perhaps were not thinking of, then your next proposal was not even what you thought anyway. You were just showing me an example. And then I thought the bottom line there was remove the chairs. And maybe that was an incorrect.
Yeah, I think we're waiting for, I think there was a lot of debate on it. We didn't come to any final consensus in our bandstand meeting, but there's going to be a briefing this afternoon. So I think we were premature in just downgrading where we are, because we really haven't heard from the committee. This full commission hasn't heard from the committee with the justification. So I think we were a little premature just, taking this out at this point.
Okay.
So.
And then the other day, maybe getting 100.
Yeah,
looking at
so
renting
we went back
them,
and forth, back and forth.
so-
So then I think we decided, I think, well, let's hear from the full analysis of what
Okay.
we want to invest and why, if anything, and let the
Okay.
commissioners have that discussion before
So-
we just take everything off the
So
plate.
then we'll wait to hear.
I think that's the right
Okay.
thing to do.
The Lake Gerard accretion project, that needs to be put off. It was 51,000, I believe, 2 years ago when it was taken out of the budget. We didn't include it in last year's budget because of the Lake Avenue Phase 2 streetscape. Now that we have funding in for the Lake Avenue Phase 2 streetscape, the Director of Public Works recommendation is to put that in at the end of at the end of the project for Lake Avenue, because that's when it really needs to be done. Is that
That
correct?
makes sense.
Right,
So
that would be my recommendation.
Timing issue, okay.
Because you have all that construction that's going to go on right around there. You're going to get sediments into
You've
the
said
Oh,
that
yeah, yeah.
before, that's true. But okay, so that would be the next budget year. It won't be this year that would be able to do it. Okay.
Can we
I do think it's
All right,
important, so
that's
yeah,
fine.
I agree that next year we want to make sure we can do it after the Lake Avenue project.
That's really
And it is in there for 2022, so,
Yeah.
yeah.
And then.
And then the 4th Street Sussex work, the 220,000. So that was not put back into the budget. Kevin can explain this, but we looked at after the stormwater, the storm sewer issues, obviously, there was a sequence of events that needed to happen before we actually got to that. So can you explain that?
Two things. One, the immediacy of the other issues we showed already, that roughly the same amount, so we figured that had a higher priority than Kent Street. That was it.
There's no reason to, like, that you have to get the Baltimore Street done before you start Sussex. Like, there's no sequential requirement to have Baltimore done before you would tackle.
That's correct.
Okay. So,
And we also have, just hold that thought, we also have, we're anticipating doing some research and work in order to implement, and some of this was talked about earlier today, a stormwater assessment fee for taxpayers. And if we did that in the next year or so, some of that money would be able to pay for that. So that's just an aside.
well, I'd like to see a way of putting that in the budget. I mean, and I think that we said that several times. So, I mean, yeah, a fee is one thing, but boy, I don't see that happening for a while. I mean, I don't.
Next year, next year's budget, maybe? I don't know.
Yeah, I'm putting a fee on stormwater or on someone's bill right now, which would be not something I could support.
Well, I heard it, I think Commissioner Gay brought it up earlier, stormwater.
I may have mentioned it.
Okay.
Well, I mean, I just can't support it
I
for this
just,
year.
only that it was talked about, it was talked about at the last meeting, and I know it's one of those things that needs a long time to get going because they have to study it, and there's formulas, and it's very complicated. But what I heard at the last meeting was that there was going to be, I guess, a task force to start looking at that.
Right,
Right, yeah,
correct.
right.
So I would like to figure out how we get in there and what some trade-offs we could make to put that in there. Sorry, to be specific, the Sussex stormwater issue, because I think the same reasons you brought up not to put it in this year have been the same reasons for a decade. And I'll go back to something Kevin
What
said, I'm
about
sorry.
other revenue sources? Have we, I know you've brought some things forward, but have we really, looked at everything? Is there anything possible that we could look at in terms of more revenue sources?
And why I brought up process and again, is in the last meeting, I said, well, what causes something to be urgent? And the answer was, and it was a good answer, is look, we look at, criteria, we look at practices, we look at standards, and so in the example of standing water and issues like they're having on 4th and Sussex, there's standing water there. You said if it was over 48 hours, then that would bump it up to an urgent project. So I'm not sure that that's changed, just because some priorities have changed. It's still an urgent project. That doesn't, maybe this group will eventually not vote on it as a priority, but it's still an urgent priority if it meets that criteria of standing water over so many hours. Do you see what I'm saying? So these categorizations
I would just
didn't
kind of clarify a little
change.
bit. I don't
Okay.
think the 48-hour standard was ever mentioned as makes it an urgent project. I think that's I think I should have said, if I didn't, that's kind of the standard in the industry, that if there's something that lasts longer 48 hours, you work it in to try to get it fixed.
Okay.
That if it's less than 48, you really don't even want to spend time addressing it. So that would be maybe to clarify that a little bit.
That helps. So anyway, I just think we should
Is
try
that
to.
the only place in the city where there's water?
No.
Oh. I was afraid you'd say that.
We have to start somewhere. Maybe that we start with this and then identify the other areas. If it's critical, I just know this area, people can't get into their driveways. They can't get into their
But
house.
that's why I'm wondering if there are
when
other
there's an
areas that are
issue.
that same,
Yeah.
that have that same problem.
Right. So I guess what I really need to do on that particular street is see it after a big event. Because after a normal event, I haven't seen that where they couldn't get out of their cars and get into their houses. I haven't seen
They
that.
can jump over it. They can
No,
put a
okay.
plank
No, I'm with
down.
you.
Plank's there. Go look at it. It's the
Sure, right.
plank's
I have
right
not
there
seen
right
it.
now.
So I haven't gone. I need to go out after a big storm to see.
But it's
on
even big
on a normal
storms.
routine rain, last few rains, it has not been a case. Has not been the case.
Yeah, I'll send you pictures.
Yeah. No, I truly, I'm sure it happens on a big rain. I'm sure it does. We have that lots of places. So Kevin Williams's prioritization of things are, we're going to have it in there, and it needs to be done. But I need to fix Baltimore Avenue. Yeah, I mean, without
Absolutely.
have to fix Baltimore Avenue.
Hands down.
Now, if
Agree.
somebody wants to write you a $250,000 check, I'd be happy to spend it over there, unless the video I'm doing this week and next week gives me another Baltimore Avenue.
Yeah,
So
definitely.
that's what I've got to fix the broken stuff first. We've been living with that for a while. I hate to ask you to keep living with it for a while, but it just of those two priorities. The other one,
I don't put those two as competing against each other. I do put dump truck for 100 or whatever, the 170,000 competing with that project, or I'm sorry, I don't know all the vehicle terms, but I do, that's where I put the competing priorities, is on those type of investments, not on, in no way, shape, or form do I think we should delay at all the Baltimore stormwater. I think it's an incredible, I'm just a little concerned we're waiting as long as we are, but it sounds like we can, but nonetheless, I'm looking for other trade-offs. And if you come back one more time, because I have scrubbed the expenses, and you're doing a great job, Sharon, running things, and really, the expenses look good. Those are the only, some of those capital projects, is there
Equipment
more of a
purchases seem to
trade-off?
be
That's what I'm saying. It's not the stormwater in this, and then my last thing, and I apologize, but we haven't talked about this, but one of the things when we passed the stormwater, the new rates, was that we asked that we come up with a conservation, program, and it seems to me that should be part of the budget process. If the conservation program, water conservation program is going to include some sort of, feedback or some rebate to homeowners or property owners that conserve water to a certain degree, it seems that we should put aside a fund somewhere in the budget. I think, I don't know, you can tell me, but it's just something we talked about, we asked, to be done. In fact, I think it's in the ordinance. So is there a budget implication in implementing that program? And if so, should that be somehow in the budget? I just didn't want to forget that, so,
Okay.
thank you.
So I have 3 items. We're going to cut the scope of the restrooms in half. We're going to reduce the tot lot to 150, see what that looks like. And we're going to attempt to look at Sussex, 4th and Sussex, and try to get that back. We're going to wait for this afternoon for the convention center chairs to see that direction. And you understand now about Lake Gerard accretion.
Yeah. Except for the restrooms, it wasn't cutting it in half, it was looking at the options of 2 versus 4, I think is what Commissioner Burns said, and we all agreed with.
But you have
With
cut in
no
half.
changing room.
No changing room, but a 2 and a 4 on the family restroom.
Different scope of the project itself.
Okay.
But then Kevin asked, what would we target in terms of, what are we looking at? And so I just made up in half, but I mean, I don't know, it's a good enough target. So he asked that question, so I responded.
Okay.
So,
And then the library and Main Street, are we?
I'm fine with the library. I just don't feel, and I support Main Street. I think they're doing a great job. It's just that it would be nicer to have had their financials before you make that kind of decision.
I know
They're
the
asking for $10,000 more.
the financials was just sent to Ann a little bit ago, so I'm sure when she has time, she'll forward it to the commissioners.
You're fine with the libraries?
I'm fine with the library.
good with the library.
You're fine with going
Libraries,
from 15 to 30?
30
Yes.
to 30.
and then on Main Street, 50 to 60, and you'll get the financials.
Assuming we'll get the financials.
Is there anything else for Sharon that?
I've got 2 simple questions and 1 request, I guess. On item, this was item 66 in the 1.3 version of the capital improvement plan. The Lake Avenue 2nd Street streetscape, $50,000. But I noticed earlier there was $200,000 or $400,000 for this Lake Ave 2nd Street streetscape. I think item number 6. Is that duplicated in some way, or?
No, so the 50,000 is the landscaping that's needed
Okay, so
in
one
front of
is
the
streetscape,
hotel.
one is landscape.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, all right, understood. Two things that I'd like to get via email before the next meeting is a list of all real estate assets of the city, which I don't think Commissioner Gay has either. And then I think it was discussed in the last budget meeting that a list of all the fees would be provided to the commissioners. All the business license fees, I think there's a few different types of them. You've got real estate agents and people
And
that do
permits and
what?
everything too. And permits and everything
And
too.
permits, a list of all the fees, because I think one of the things that I want to make sure is, and I know it was talked about last year, I don't know enacted in any way, but if real estate agents are, I'm just using an example, and I don't know that the numbers are correct, but if they're paying $50 for a license fee in Rehoboth and getting a parking permit with that, that doesn't really make sense when they're paying a $50 fee but getting a $270 parking pass. So I think we just need to take a look at all of those fees and just make sure they're in line with what we're looking at. And then the other takeaway I thought there was from the last budget meeting was charging buses a fee coming into town. And I know, I think 2 years ago, we had the executive director of Main Street, I think, was working with Evan. She did some research on other municipalities and Main Street programs that deal with buses coming into town. And from what I heard from the last budget meeting, we were going to get some feedback on that.
We'll provide that for you at the next meeting. Anything else?
Anybody else?
If you do think of something, just, let me know.
If that's all for us, any citizen comment? Please.
Hello. It's been a long meeting.
Name and address, please.
Mimi Parvis, 51 Henlopen. I'm going to say something a little snarky, but it just kind of gets my goat. I go up to Deauville Beach all the time, and that lot gets full all the time. And since the trolley was brought up, I wanted to make some comments about that. I looked at the map, and I live at 51 Henlopen, and one of the stops is 54. It sounds to me like the purpose of this trolley, and it's not going to eliminate people from coming into town. They have to come in and find a parking spot, one of the stops, park on residential streets where we park, and then hop on a trolley and go around and do whatever. They could also, but they need to get a parking pass to park on the street before 5 o'clock. Some of them might figure out and get very savvy about it and not get a parking pass, come in for free, park on our streets, and take this trolley wherever they want to go, and then come back maybe at 10 o'clock at night and maybe have had too much to drink because they're getting a trolley. I just think it's really absurd, and I think it's absurd that we're paying for it. I really think it needs to be thought through, and if you guys are thinking that people can go up and park at Deauville lot, that lot is full by 11, 12 o'clock, and you want this thing to run from 10 to 10, which I think is pretty ridiculous, and then somebody put in there narrated, come on. I don't want to have a trolley going down my street with somebody doing a microphone talking about Rehoboth. I just think it's crazy. Anyway, that's one of my spiels. The thing about not printing the parking permits that we get, the hang tags, we all homeowners get the sticker to put on our windshield, which I don't know how much that costs to make. But the hang tags, for one thing, if we're doing it electronically and we don't have anything hanging down, like for instance on my son's car, we go up to Surf Avenue, park it. We take one big car for my grandson's toys and all the other stuff and park up there, and then the rest of us ride our bikes up. But how would the policemen know, or whoever's going up and down the beaches with, you need to have a permit, how would they know we have a permit? They wouldn't know unless they'd have to get all sorts of some serious equipment so they could look it up and look up the license plate. And that would cost a lot of money, I think. I just think, and also if you're renting a house, most people you generally get 2 hang tags when you rent a house, and you get it at the real estate agent, and you have to pay $100 for each one in case you lose it, and then you turn them back in and you get that back. How would that work if you don't have plastic hang tags? Because you can't put the owner's license plate on that, because then the people who are driving the renters would get a ticket. Anyway, that's something that's how my brain works. Let's see. The tennis courts, the repaving for tennis courts. I used to play tennis all the time, and we would get to the point where some of the courts for rec council and up in Towson, there was one set of courts that were just unplayable. They had cracks in them, grass in them, but that was our assigned court to go play with the Towson Rec Council. The tennis courts, you have to pay $10 an hour to play. That is a revenue, that provides revenue. And I think it's kind of silly to defer that. It's a very cheap line item to go ahead and just get that done as soon as possible, because I haven't looked at those courts in a while, but they're not wonderful. And I don't know how much it would cost, but the bottom line is every time you defer something, it gets more expensive the next year. And you want people to come in, and the Deauville lot those tennis courts are used pretty regularly. So, you might lose out on $10 an hour because people go, oh, I'm not going to play here. I don't. Anyway, so I think that's all I had. I'm very concerned about the tot lot, cutting down all those trees specifically. It sounds too big. I have a 3.5-year-old grandson, and we go to these tot lots all the time, and they're wonderful, and I think that one's great. But, we've been on this tree thing for a long time, and if they make this thing 1/4 of an acre in that spot right there, I think they'd have to cut down at least 10 trees to do it. And anyway, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Now I have to go meet my plumber. I've changed it 3 times.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else?
Suzanne Good, 1 Grove Street. I firstly want to thank you for, it seems there's a consensus to up the library from 15,000 to 30,000 for a reason that you may not expect. There are a lot of people around here, not just in Sussex County, but all over the country, suffering because you have these natural monopolies like Comcast who are fleecing consumers. Apparently the FCC, which is supposed to regulate telecom, is not doing any job whatsoever. So because of that, I think the library, at least in the short term, certainly until the government gets involved better in reining in these greedy monopolies, the library is an important resource, because not everybody in this town can pay what it costs to get high-speed internet. That's just a fact. And so I think, and sadly, if many times when library budgets are on the chopping block, it becomes known that more people are actually using the internet rather than looking in the stacks for books. But it's nice that those of us who do look in the stacks for books can find like the Pat Conroy novels there that I personally like to read. And I like that it's a walkable field trip for Rehoboth Elementary, because walkable field trips save the Cape Henlopen School District money and also give the kids the idea that they can sometimes walk to destinations rather than being taken in cars. My second issue is a recurring issue with me. I felt when I learned about Rehoboth Beach Main Street, I have to give credit to my friend Gary Glass, with whom I have coffee as often as I can, that this is basically, to begin with, business welfare in an era when social media companies like Facebook and its subsidiary Instagram provide all the marketing a lot of these small businesses need. In fact, Facebook is probably the main driver of small business right now. The user interface is so easy for a business owner who isn't even tech savvy to say, tonight we're having like a Zero oven, half-price pasta or whatever they announce, and and Facebook software, I don't know what algorithm they use, but they manage to reach the people to whom it's relevant, who have shown interest in a particular restaurant or a particular clothing store or whatever. So, you know, the 50,000 they're already getting, I took the time. I'm one of the 130 people, apparently, according to Director Slagle, who got one of those coupon booklets. I happened to get mine on Saturday morning, November 30th. But I think that an additional 10,000 on top of the 50,000 is a no-go. They need to become more financially independent. If it were up to me, it was disbanded in 2014, I believe, and resurrected in 2017. I wish it hadn't been. But now that we have a new executive director as of, I guess, September, you know, it's probably too much to hope for. My third issue has to do with the Jolly Trolley. I agree with most of what my neighbor just said, but my more overarching issue is that there are too many inherent problems with public transportation. Bus ridership in this country, I happen to have seen an article just a few days ago in the Wall Street Journal, is actually down. Subway ridership is slightly up. Buses get caught in the same traffic that she alluded to. I know about the bumper-to-bumper traffic in the late afternoon from 4 p.m. to 7 p.m. on any good deep beach day, and if there's a thunderstorm at 12 noon, that's when it is. And this trolley will be caught in that same traffic. I don't see how it solves Rehoboth Beach parking problems, and I'm especially concerned that there's been no attention given to the possibility of Rehoboth Beach Elementary being one of the stops. And the Cape Henlopen School District, I know all too well, the enrollment is surging, their budget is growing. You will see your Sussex County property taxes going up one way or the other. They could use the revenue if Jolly Trolley could work out a rental from them. There's a problem in that elementary schools and middle schools in general don't have huge parking lots because the students can't drive, whereas like the high school over on Kings Highway in Lewis has a huge parking lot because half the kids drive and park. So I'm not sure that it's big enough for that need, but at least have some of the restaurant workers and others who may not want to pay the $3 an hour or the $2 an hour on parking have the option possibly of, if you were to start this Jolly Trolley service, to be able to park at Rehoboth Elementary. But generally, this subsidy to it, to me, is a disaster. Let them charge $5 per ride, see how it goes. They have to take on the risk, Jolly Trolley. They're a company, and they have revenue from airport runs and other things. And my last issue, Commissioner Gay talked about concern that selling 84 Kent would be like a one-time thing. But at the margin, if you were to put that, let's say, $700,000 to $800,000 toward paying down our 67 million in debt, you would every year not pay 2% interest on that 800,000 that you had reduced the debt by. So you could think of it as a recurring revenue source because you're not paying 2% debt. So I don't know enough about 84 Kent to know if it would be easy to market and sell quickly. I mean, McMansions seem to be going up like crazy, but generally land and real estate here hasn't been appreciating as much in the last 5 years as, let's say Arlington, Virginia. You know, that's like on fire. So I'm not sure holding on to it makes sense. I'm not worried that it's going to somehow be worth $1.5 million 3 years from now. So that's all I have, and I'm very impressed by you. You do seem to be exercising due diligence and looking at a lot of issues, and I appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Terry Eskew, 102 Henlopen Avenue. I wanted to also thank you for the time you spent because I don't come to many of these meetings, but from what I've heard in the last 3.5 hours, you spend a lot of time on the details and really trying to decide where your priorities are. The reason I wanted to speak today, and I was very concerned about this, there's actually two issues, but one is primarily of a concern. Since I have a house on Henlopen Avenue, I arrived here a couple of days ago. I do not live here, I rent it out. I've spoken to several neighbors on Henlopen Avenue. I must tell you that the 100% consensus was people were not aware in regards to this shuttle service that, number one, they were not really familiar with the route that was shown on the website. They were under the impression, and I'm talking now about 8 different neighbors I've spoken with. They were under the impression that this shuttle would somehow carry people from parking lots or a parking lot on Route 1, bring them into town so that they would not have to park in town. I see you shaking your head, but believe me, this is what I've heard from them. The other thing that that I mentioned in terms of speaking with neighbors, when I referred them to the website for the city of Rehoboth, there is no indication on that website that there is actually even a survey going on. There again, all of the people, every single person, every single neighbor that I spoke with was completely unaware, number one, of Mind Mixer. They had never heard of the site. And number two, they were not aware that there is currently, the website is collecting the survey in regards to this shuttle. And I just looked just now, only 61 respondents have taken the survey in regards to the shuttle. And I must tell you, 10 of those are my renters, because I called many of the renters that come to my house every year. I've owned my house 20 years. I asked them flat out, go to the website, look at the route that is proposed. Would you take that shuttle? Now, that shuttle has a proposed stop. I think it's maybe a block from where my house is located. None of them said that they would take it. I then called members of my family who spend time at my house that have guests that rent there. None of those people said that they would take it. So I asked those people, please go on the Mind Mixer website, take the survey. So 10 of those 61 are people that I spoke to that, number one, had no idea about the survey, and number two, do not want the shuttle. Going back to something, and I think it was really important, Commissioner Schlosser kept referring to process. And I totally agree with you, because through all of the items that are discussed today, process is so critically important. And you said, what causes something to be urgent? I wrote down those words. I think that was an excellent way to approach this, because I understand that you, and maybe as a committee and several of you, have been discussing this shuttle for many years. To a lot of people that I've spoken to, this is brand new news. They weren't sure about it, and they weren't even sure there was a survey going on. So I have a couple questions that I would like to have registered. I would like to say, please add the Mind Mixer survey website to the city's website that talks about the shuttle, because there is no connection right now. People do not know there's a survey going on. Number two, I would like to request that you extend the deadline to respond to the survey, because I think there's only 2 more weeks to respond. There again, most people are out of town. They're not even aware a survey is going on. Number three, an issue that has come up. People have said to me, in looking at the route that is proposed, is this a veiled way to provide parking for Clear Space Theater? Because it's very curious how the route goes from, it goes behind where Clear Space would have their theater built, goes down Sussex, which is a very narrow street, and then cuts over and comes across to Henlopen. So one of the concerns is this a way for the city to subsidize parking for Clear Space Theater, because it goes directly behind where the theater is to be built in the future? The other question I would like to have addressed is, this is, several people brought this up. If the shuttle is going to take place for 10 hours a day, 7 days a week, 10 a.m. to 10 p.m., there is no lighting now at Deauville Beach, I believe. So will the city be responsible for paying for lighting? Because that's a safety issue. If people are going to park there and it's pitch black, no lighting, how are they going to pick up people that are going to be standing around waiting down there, that might be trying to go get their car or leave their car to go somewhere else? My last question is, in looking at the route of the shuttle, the people that I've spoken to, all of my neighbors, including me on Henlopen Avenue, were very upset that it is going down Henlopen Avenue, because we love the fact that it is currently a bicycle route. But when you have all the parking spaces on the gravel taken up all through the summer with renters, guests, and residents, the only place for people to walk is on the street with their baby carriages, with their bikes, with hauling all of their beach paraphernalia. And I would like to ask all of you, how many of you are scheduled right now to have the shuttle route in front of your house, possibly with a narrator, from 10 a.m. to 10 p.m., 7 days a week, from Memorial Day until Labor Day? And how would you feel about that? That you also, a lot of these people have grandchildren with strollers, and they're on the street, and they're trying to now dodge the shuttle service. So those are my questions, those are my recommendations. And I thank all of you for the work you do.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Walter Birmingham, 123 Open Avenue. First of all, Sharon, thank you for the supporting documents, very complete. It would be helpful when you're talking about a line, you'll tell us about where you're talking about. Institutional knowledge, that's my subject preliminarily today. And it's got to do with the restrooms. I was around, I was commissioner at the time that we did Baltimore Avenue restroom. We thought we were doing a good job. We had very nice plans, and then we found out that we needed piling in most of the new section that we were building in the back, and it stopped everything. We were not thinking about anything beyond some sort of a footing and building it up. And I think you're being conservative. I think you need room. I'll use Baltimore Avenue as a place to talk about. I'd like you to think about at the end of the street, most of the streets, there's a fire hydrant. But there's some infrastructure that the city could move easily, but I think you should think about before you're trying to keep things very small. I think you ought to think about, as a rectangle, extending it back closer to the end of the rounding of the street so that in time that you're not enlarging them again because nobody wants it in front of their businesses. There was huge hell raising when putting the roof as it is on the Baltimore Avenue restroom, that you went down the street that you could not see the ocean. I think maybe Paul, that you were probably the only people around, maybe Pat, when that was being discussed. But I would encourage you to think about extending the triangle back, even if it's 50 foot, and if it extends back into the radius of the end of the street, because when you put it there, it's going to be there, and it could be not necessarily 2 stories or whatever you want to make it, but you need that footprint, and it would make the handicap a lot easier. Well, that's my historical knowledge. I have a comment about the Henlopen, and when I left here last time, and I actually feared yesterday, and I think, I'm sorry she's not here, but I think Liz put fear in people because it's one of the biggest things I have heard about. I was actually thinking this morning that they would be probably down there ripping out the top lot because it's very, very unsafe. But I found out I was taking pictures, other people were taking pictures, and the pictures that I took, some of what showed some of the things, but she didn't show the pictures last time, and I thought that was wrong. I went to the Italian Garden, I took a picture of the swing set, if that was what they were talking about last time, and I encourage you to go over there. It's very sound structure, if that's what she was talking about last time. I took them at the big tot lot at the Henlopen. I did not go inside the fence. I thought somebody might complain because I didn't have a kid in there, but there were no kids in there. The worst problem that I saw there was the trees around the tot lot are too low. If I stooped over, you would still hit the trees. The city needs to trim them up. So the people that are not parents that are standing around the outside, or somebody who's got a problem, is not having an eye punched out. I don't know where the Henlopen Hotel, Henlopen Condo, Mariners Park improvements sit, but I think you're talking about if it's still something that's going to be looked at. I don't know why that's not the first subject before you modify the playground. I go to the playgrounds, and I was here beforehand, and back in Mr. Cooper's administration, and Paul was on it at the time, and Mr. Faris, and the city of Rehoboth has favored suppliers for their contractors and their suppliers of playground equipment, to the fact that, and I go to many of the things I see advertised, the city of Rehoboth may reject any and or all bids without reason. And I think that's wrong. I think there should have to be justification. In fact, you were sued. Nobody ever heard anything about it. But there are more than one supplier of playground stuff, and I think you need to be looking at it. I also, almost nearing completion, state contract. State contract is not necessarily the lowest price. Sometimes it's the highest price. They are the people that put in a bid for certain equipment, or excuse me, they put in prices. And I encourage you to look up the definition of a state contract to see what it actually says, because in many cases, you can get it for a lot lower in price. And Kevin, the sewer lateral was at Wilmington Avenue, Delaware Avenue? Baltimore. So will the city coordinate and have that straightened out? Because the contractor would have taken it to the street, is that right?
Yes, he would have taken it to the main, yeah.
To the main. So somewhere in the process, the city was. And I have no question, but Jim Smith and the people at Delmarva Power, if they're pushed, they'll take care of the duct bank that goes across there. People shouldn't live in fear about that. Delmarva, I'm an outside contractor to them, but they'll do their stuff, and the city ought to do their stuff. And I thank you all for, there was not nearly as much unnecessary banter today, and I think it was a very constructive meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. This meeting is adjourned. See you at 3 o'clock.
See you in 5 minutes.
15 minutes.
See you back in,
Yeah.